Hello, BookTube. Okay, naturally, I'm wondering uh, the usual questions. First, can you hear me? And the question before that, will the little spinning wheel saying you are going live actually get me live? That works. So now I just have to worry about volume. I can see once again the little green status dots responding to my mellifluous tones. So I'm assuming you can hear me. And that's good because in this Stevestream, we are going to solve all your problems. You are going to tell me a problem and I'm going to solve it because Steve is all knowing. Steve is all powerful. But first, before we solve all your problems, I suppose we should uh, deal with the elephant in the room. For those of you who are pop culture inclined, my channel does not, I don't think, attract a lot of people who are pop culture inclined. It's kind of weird. This is always the weirdness that I face just in dealing with the much vaunted and genuinely much loved booktube community. I While I was gone for the month that I was gone, I confess that the thought crossed my mind often: how on earth do you fit into this community? What on earth does the rest of this community make out of you? And of course, the answer is that unlike most people on booktube, uh, it's not booktube who make up the bulk. The bulk other booktubers make up the bulk of my connections here. Of the bulk of my community is people who aren't booktubers. But I never quite know. I mean, the pop culture people, the movie people don't think that I'm a movie person. The comic book people don't think that I'm a comic book person. The science fiction and fantasy people don't think that I'm a science fiction and fantasy person, even though I've read more of it than they have, read more comics than they have, seen more movies than they have. The romance people, aside from Sarah, don't think that I'm part of their community. The contemporary lit people, the how many times a day do you think about the Roman Empire people? None of them want to include me in the groups that show up in their discords or in their live stream chats or in the comments of their videos. None of those people want to include me. And I don't quite know why. Is it just that they're more comfortable with people who are in their world but in no other world? Is that it? I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea why the military history people. I'm assuming that the military history people don't want me in their community or don't think of me as part of a military history community because I am also a reader of science fiction and romance and contemporary biography. I have no idea. I have no idea. But I don't think that I have many pop culture friends in my own little booktube community. Maybe I do. But for the ones that are there, the elephant in the room here is, of course, the trailer for the Fantastic Four movie that just dropped, as the kids say. Uh, the reaction channels all over YouTube have been all over this thing, and I'm amazed. I'm continuously amazed by the way that 21st century moviegoers just don't get it. It's like Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football, where every time Charlie Brown thinks, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to run at this football and try to kick it because you're going to pull it away at the last minute. And every time Lucy tells him, no, I absolutely won't. Here's a list of reasons why I won't. And then she does every time. It's the same way with aficionados of modern Hollywood, whether they're the neckbeater quasi-fascists on the right, the MAGA end of the spectrum, or the blue-haired, grievance politics people from the other end of the spectrum. No matter which end of the spectrum they're on, they are perpetually disappointed and outraged by. I always want to say to these people, it's not just that the the ideologues who run the entertainment industry are personally committed to doing all the things that they've been doing since around 2010. It's not just that they're personally committed to it. The companies have written it into the bylaw. They would be fired. They would be in breach of contract with their shareholders if they didn't do it. If they didn't do all the stuff that has systematically decimated the enthusiastic movie-going audience, systematically decimated it at a time when it really couldn't stand any decimation, considering the rise of home theaters that don't cost $200 to go to a one movie one time. Uh, the identity politics and grievance politics and thwarting the male gaze and subversion of expectations and all that gigantic menu of pure stinking crapola is actually litigatable as a business model in Hollywood. Every major studio has made pledges. Every major studio has wooed hyper-moneyed executives on the promise of those things. They cannot stop delivering those things. They will not anyway because they're religious zealots, but they also cannot stop doing that. So, and every single time something is about to hoover onto the horizon, Marvel or DC, superhero or science fiction, the whole body of fans, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, are always thinking, oh, this time it might be different. Oh, this time it might be different. And then it isn't different. It does exactly what you predict, and they're outraged all over again. So the Fantastic Four trailer dropped, and I have watched a million reaction videos to it. I had a bunch of reactions of my own, but the number one reaction of my own is not to what was in the trailer, it's to what wasn't in the trailer. And that was very canny on the part of the studio. It was very canny of them not to put the thing in the trailer that would completely torpedo the movie. That is going to completely torpedo the movie. The only people who are the Fantastic Four isn't like Batman or Superman. No one knows who the Fantastic Four is unless you know who they are. You don't know who they are. Unless you're a comic book fan, you don't know who they are. You might say that was true of the Avengers, but by the time the Avengers came around, the movie going audience did know who all the individual people were. The groundwork had been carefully laid. The Fantastic Four, nobody knows who they are, unless you're a comic book fan. Nobody knows who they are, which means that the core of your movie going audience for the Fantastic Four movie is going to be comic book fans. Which means if you do something in your Fantastic Four movie that aligns with the legal promises that you've made to your shareholders, but that is completely anathema to movie-going audiences, your movie will bomb. Or will, if it doesn't technically bomb, it will still make more money than Nicaragua, but it won't be a success. No one will like it. No one will want it. It will get horrible reviews. The surefire way you can guarantee doing that is to do that kind of revisionist, denying the male gaze, subverting expectations crapola that has completely captured Hollywood since around 2010. That's the surest way to do it. And that is going to happen in this movie. And all the people out there hoping that it won't, that somehow or other it won't, I just don't know what to tell them. How many times do you need this football pulled away from you before you realize that this is a business model in Hollywood? It is not going anywhere. It literally doesn't matter to them if they burn their entire industry to the ground. That literally does not matter to them. Several people in several arms of Hollywood have had a complete Jim Jones style reversal of thinking so that they are actually proud when people hate their movie. This is not exaggeration. This has actually happened. There have been parties and meetings in the Hollywood Hills where people congratulate each other on how much money their movie lost because they think they're Rosa Parks, because they think if it lost this much money, it means we cheesed off that many cross-burning racists. They're proud of their movie doing poorly. What's the matter, baby? Huh? What's the matter? Where's the baby girl? Do you want to come down here? Warmer down here than up there. Come on down here. There you go. Oh. Oh, there you go, baby. Now don't go anywhere. Just stay right here. Just stay right there. There you go. So anyway, my before we move on to your problems that I'm going to solve, my main reaction to the Fantastic Four trailer is not what was in it, but what wasn't in it. And what wasn't in it was a female Silver Surfer. And that's the movie. That's the movie. No Fantastic Four fan is going to like this movie the minute they see that the rumors they've heard are true and that the female surfer has been sex swapped. No Fantastic Four fan is going to like the movie once that's true, because the Silver Surfer is a man, not a woman. And if you're going to adapt the Fantastic Four and change that, well, then you're not producing an adaptation of the Fantastic Four. You are instead calling all the creators who have ever been involved with the Fantastic Four on screen, in cartoons, and in comic books sexist. You're calling them misogynists. You're scolding your fans when you do that. And naturally, the movie theater had enough sense to know that if the female Silver Surfer is in the trailer, that'll be it. That'll be the only thing that anybody's talking about, and no one will go to see the movie. It might be possible, if you don't do that until the last minute, that you get enough people running at your football so that you can successfully yank it out from under them. Then it will be there. Then it will be there. And it won't just be that. It won't just be that. Several neck-bearded fascists on YouTube pointed out that we never see the face of Galactus. That might not be a coincidence. That might be a conscious decision. But it doesn't matter what we haven't seen. It matters. This thing is going to be woke to its eyeballs, is basically what I'm trying to say. Meaning that it'll be the same things with the James Gunn Superman movie, which again, fanboys are all worked up thinking this finally won't be the kind of grievance politics, identity politics crapola that has been in every single show we've seen on cable and on the big screen for the last 15 years. This finally won't be that. I don't know what to tell these guys. How stupid can you be? Superman, the star of the movie, is going to learn about heroism from Mr. Terrific because Mr. Terrific is black. He's going to learn about fitting in with humanity from Hawkgirl because Hawkgirl is a woman. He's not going to be good at anything until he is taught these lessons by his betters. How you cannot think that after all these disappointments and nothing that isn't. And the same thing's going to be true with the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards in the Marvel Universe is the smartest person in the world. Sue Richards is going to solve every problem in this movie, save the movie, and help everybody out. It might be done well, might be acted well, but that's repulsive. And that plus, I guarantee you, empowerment talking female Silver Surfer is going to doom this movie. And no pun intended with Dr. Doom. And that is why they didn't show it. So there you go. What do I think about the rest of it? A slimline, smooth-talking Ben Grimm, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. I mean, it's been wince-inducing to watch the neck-bearded quasi-fascist be so openly racist about Pedro Pascal, just openly racist, saying that he looks like an illegal immigrant, saying that he looks like a gaucho. Ugh. Just repulsive. You don't even. You want to turn the volume down on the video, but of course I'm watching it to see what they have to say. But he's also bad. He's also miscast. He's not right for the role. And once again, for the fourth time in a row, by my count, maybe the third time in a row, you have a roasting tobacco addict playing the Human Torch, which is kind of ironic. We don't get any action scenes really to speak of, so we don't know what that will be like, but this will be the third time that the Invisible Woman's superpowers, those of you who don't, I promise I'm going to get off this. We won't talk about comics all night. The Invisible Woman, Sue Richards, as she becomes, has the ability to turn invisible, but she also has the ability to emit invisible force fields that can take pretty much any shape that she wants. She really is one of Marvel's under the radar, all-powerful characters. And once again, in this movie, as in every other movie, every other time that she's been done, the director of photography and the director simply do not see the dramatic potential in the Invisible Woman's powers actually being invisible. Instead, they're wavery things. But no one can see them. The whole point is that they're invisible. If you didn't have wavery sound special effects to show that something was happening, you could, if you knew what you were doing, make some really great visuals. But no. But anyway, it didn't enthuse me, is what I'm trying to say. So now that we're done with that, let's move on to your problems, because these are fraught times, as I am endlessly told in publicist emails where they say, I hope you're doing well in these times. No, I'm not doing well in these times. I'm actually in the 1920s. What other times do you think I would be in? That whole piece of boilerplate, hope you're doing well in these terrible times, started with COVID. Well, COVID is over. Of course you're writing to me in these times. What do you think you're writing to me in? The reign of Gilgamesh? Anyway, uh, I'm constantly told by those people that these are fraught times, and I'm here to help. Help me help you. I'm here to help. So I will hear your problems and I will solve them on the fly. But first, let's look at the chat because I don't know how long this Steve stream is going to be. These have been epically long. I don't know how long this is going to be, but let's see what the chat has to say as you tell me your problems, and then I will solve them. So the first one out of the gate is Rodency Royalist, a regular on these chats. Not a name I recognize from ye olden days, but Steve, you choosing that still from Magnolia, in which Cruz plays that contemporarily relevant grifter, is effing amazing. I love Magnolia so much. What a pertinent selection. PTA's oeuvre. Wow. Now, Steve hates anybody who has a French body of work, and Steve hates PTA. But Magnolia is great. Magnolia is absolutely incredible. Rasmus says, we'll all be working the mines in El Salvador before the end of this decade. Rodency is back. Magnolia alone proves that Cruz is a lethal dramatic actor. No, let's not go crazy now. Let's not go crazy. Okay. The scene with his father with PSH in the background is insanely emotional for me. What a performance. Do you think Cruz is underrated? Think back on that scene with his father. Okay. I want you to take the emotions down a notch and think back to that scene with his father. Now think about a really, really bad actor. Maybe not Michael Paré bad, but John Voight. Picture a really, really bad actor. They would be effective in that scene. The scene is the effective thing, not the actor. Anyone, you, I would be effective in that scene. Uh, Cruz is not lethal as a dramatic actor. No, no, not at all. He is a legitimate movie star. He is magnetic and unbelievable. Uh, but he's used to precise effect in Magnolia. Okay, precise effect. If you can even manage to mentally swap him for Julianne Moore in that movie, you'll see that he couldn't have done her role, the male equivalent of her role. He couldn't have come close. To say nothing of, let's not overrate things here. AKA says Magnolia is one of my favorite films. Tom Cruise's Dude Bro speech in it cracked me up so much. To think Andrew Tate believes he's original. Rodency says disgusting. I don't know what that's in reference to though. Rodency says, AKA, I personally believe Magnolia is a 5-5 alongside TWBB. Okay. Okay. You're talking to each other anyway. Evil Joshua is here. Hey Steve, have you been working on any fiction during your Odin sleep? Do you have any plans to draft something in the spring in place of Camp NaNoWriMo? Well, I wouldn't have to wait for the spring. I have Steve Reads, and I can publish anything I want on Steve Reads. My revived blog, Steve Reads, is on Substack. And I've posted some fiction on there, and I could anything that I write, I could put there, and I fully intend to. I haven't come up with anything yet. No, I have a couple of ideas. I kind of want to write a murder mystery. I failed, in my opinion, I have failed at every murder mystery I've tried to write, and that bugs me. That nags at me. Hiding in the margin says, "Hi Steve, I just finished watching your take on the bookish elements tag. All I can say is bullshit." I I wasn't sure whether or not I should go through all of my notes, but then I just went with it. Uh, Regency Royalist is talking to AKA. AKA says, reading War and Peace, and I annotated a line about how the Russians fear Napoleon with simply aura. I truly am connecting with the Western canon. Rodency says, Steve, may I be the Mephisto to your Faust? Dylan says, hi, Steve. I love the section of the Bookish Element tag where you read out some of your annotations. It was a real joy, comedic and astute in equal measures. I took a gamble, but I hoped that it would work. That Some of you would like it. AKA says, Dr. Steve, how many reps of lateral raises should I be doing after reading each page of Cat's Cradle? You are hurting your pump to read Vonnegut. If I could get that word out there, no one would read him again. uh, Don't Be Stupid is asking an all caps question. How old are you? I'm well known to be 28. Colombian Thunder is responding to AKA. Rodency says, Don't worry, Steve. I include you. I think you're important, man. Truly, that's why I annoy you with my questions. Apologies in advance for those. Well, I don't quite know if the inclusion is referring to BookTube. I don't quite know. In fact, not quite. I don't have any idea where I stand with BookTube. Actually, I do know. I do know where I stand. I always joke about being a leper. The bulk of BookTube channels of actual BookTubers have no use for me whatsoever. And I don't, like I said, I don't quite know why that is, unless it's that people get comfortable in their subgenres and they want uh and they only want fellow devotees. They don't want somebody who can wander off the reservation and read, a contemporary history of Brazil. They don't want that. I don't know if that's true, but nevertheless, there's got to be an explanation for the vibe that I get. Uh, AKA says, also just completed day 2 of veganism. It's very easy to do. Day 2 stretches into day 200. And keep in mind what I mentioned, the back door is wide open. You can eat meat for special occasions. You don't have to preach about it when you're out with your friends. You don't have to become a tiresome vegan. If you have a guest over, and they're having meat, you don't have to put them on the spot. You can eat meat with them. I'm talking about the day-to-day thing, the ordinary day-to-day thing when there's no pressure at all, no one watching but you. In a situation like that, it is easy to just not eat meat. Colombian Thunder is responding to Done the Stupid by telling him my age. Let's see here. Don't Be Stupid is asking if I'm really 28. Not sure what that means. Dylan says, I would suspect that a lot of people build up walls around the subculture and resist anyone, novice or seasoned veteran, into the culture if they're not sufficiently pure. Pay them no mind. Steve, well, it's hard to pay them. I know what you mean, but it's hard to pay them no mind because we all come to BookTube talking about the BookTube community. And I am pointedly excluded from that community, from a lot of the communities in that community. And it feels extra pointed because I have the credentials. The subjects interest me. Some of you remember last year, I made a concerted effort to try to break in to the Malian's girdle of the fantasy booktubers. And it just didn't have it. It just did not want me at all. Just not at all. It is a closed community. If you make a new BookTube channel and you announce and you have the right books in your background that you are only reading fantasy, that it's all you read, that's all you think about, that you're anticipating the same books, that you also think that book 13 of the Soul Shatterer series was subpar, etc., etc. If you're doing your 10th read along of Malazan Book of the Fallen or whatever, if you announce and demonstrate your bona fides that is the only thing in your reading life, then they will accept you. I've seen new channels, much newer than mine, be accepted, making far fewer overtures than I did. But if you're not willing to do that, no, then no, it's for them only, and that's a little depressing. Don't Be Stupid is back with another all caps question. Steve, have you ever been religious? No, I have not been religious. AKA says, I'm anticipating Steve's response to the above comment to be don't be stupid. I won't say that it's stupid, but it is totally irrational. Colombian Thunder says, not sure if you've seen the posters just released, but they are horrible. I've never seen a more obvious showcase of AI laziness. How much more does it cost to get a guy to make a decent poster? I don't know what you mean. Poster of Fantastic Four? Is that what you're talking about? Or we have a time lapse here, so I'm not sure what poster of what, but I think Fantastic Four is the only thing that's come up that could have a poster. But I haven't seen them. Don't Be Stupid is posting a child's cartoon. Rodency says maybe he was as a very young and impressionable Jesuit, but that doesn't seem to count since autonomy is pilfered. No, never. No other species does this nonsense. No other species has a brain capable of fearing its own death. So no other species does this. I I guess I must not be conveying what that means. If I no, no, no other species thinks about this sort of thing. Only humans do. So, no, there's never a time. Um, uh, let's see here. AKA says the last time I was watching superhero films in theater was around the Avengers Endgame period. Really feel that should have literally been the end game for them. It was what I told myself at the time. The end of Avengers Endgame. I said, all right, well, that's enough of that. This is terrific. I loved it. I loved everything about it except for the harbinger moment, the one harbinger moment at the end of that movie that showed what was coming, where by mere coincidence, all the female characters land together in a nice framing shot. That was the subtext of which was meant to say, sure, Thanos wanting to snap his fingers and eliminate every life form in the universe is bad, but it's worse the patriarchy. That scene, I love it, it's just an eye blink thing in the middle of a finale that is just incredible. It just rolls on being incredible forever and ever. So it didn't ruin the movie for me, but I saw that scene and thought, yeah, that's the future. That's the rest of Marvel movies. So no, thank you. Aslan says, a Steve film channel would be great for us. Great for you, but yeah, but not for film channels. The film channels would not be interested in it at all. They would not notice it. They would not comment on it. They would not invite me to discussions or mention anything that I said. They wouldn't do it. They would studiously ignore me, just like the fantasy booktubers did. And why? Because I don't just do movies, I guess, unless it's something to do with me. Could it be something to do with me? I hope not. Don't Be Stupid says, does anybody know where I could start with Victor Hugo and Voltaire? Thank you very much. Oh, I guess you're all being asked. In my own chat, you're all being asked, but not me, even though I've read all of Voltaire and all in the original, and you have not. All of you go in the original, and you have not. The rest of you are being asked, and not me. Great. Okay. Well, we'll see what you say. Tolstoy 111 says the self-destructive impulses in Hollywood remind me of what Bud Light did with that spokesman they hired. Who did they think their customers are? Well, they know who their customers are. They just don't like them. They share stories. They swap anecdotes. They brag about how much they're hurting their own business in the cause of right, and cause is always with a capital C. They all think they're Rosa Parks. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable communicative delusion. So that when Bud Light or Gillette or whatever, when they get the results of what they've done, they're happy about it. Because one creator put it in a different industry, we're pissing off the right people. AKA says, my takeaway from this little Steve rant is that Kevin Feige is the new Rosa Parks. Danger Kid is here. It amazes me that every once in a while, excellent movies still sneak through, but the days of big tentpoles being enjoyable, much less good, are indeed dead, I think. The tentpole movies will still keep being made, but they will all be exactly the same. They are all the football that Lucy pulls away from Charlie Brown at the last minute. And yet the fans always think this next one will be different. I don't know how many people I've heard on YouTube saying that James Gunn's Superman will be different. Lois Lane is going to save the day in the James Gunn Superman movie. If you're not mentally prepared for that now, then I don't know what movies you've been watching for the last 10 years. Anyway, Don't Be Stupid says, do you know if Candide is hard or easy to read? Well, the you here appears to be singular, so maybe you've become to ask me specifically in my own chat about that. Candide is very easy to read. Very easy to read. It's taught in schools, for Pete's sake. In an English translation. Any English translation will work just fine. It'll take you an hour to read. Aslan says the whole subverting expectations is also very present in modern fantasy, so much so that I go in expecting my expectations to be subverted. Task fates successfully, as the adage goes. Uh, well, I'm not sure about that last line, but yeah, I read science fiction and fantasy, a lot of science fiction and fantasy in 2024, and I was reading the very self-impressed effusions of little children. The way little children get proud of something I think is really clever because they have no idea that anyone watching has never thought of this before. I just it was so incredible. The bulk of it, 99% of it was so incredibly boring. Uh, anyway, Rodency says, I deeply agree with you. These ridiculous, superfluous casting changes are often upsetting. They can be done right. A good example is making Jim Gordon black since he's a cornered Lone Ranger. Uh okay. but okay. Well, all right. Police Commissioner Jim Gordon is an 80-year-old character, and he's not black. And there is an infinitude of characters that you can create for your movies that can be black. But Jim Gordon and Perry White are not black. These are not stupid consolation prizes. This. Uh, I agree that they can be done right, definitely. Like, for instance, the aforementioned Mr. Terrific. What's his name? What was his name? Oh my god. Jeff Johns? Was it Jeff Johns? A writer came along, revitalized the Justice Society of America, and took a fifth string stupid character, a superhero from the 1940s called Mr. Terrific, who believes in fair play. That writer revamped that character, race swapped him to a black man, and made him terrific and gave him an interesting backstory, an important, interesting backstory. Now, that was a revamping of a character, but nobody cared about the original Mr. Terrific. That was a perfect example of a writer making a silk purse out of a sow's ear, changing something junky into something really good, something that changing something that was forgotten, that had no heritage, no fans, and changing it, making it into something really good. So, in the James Gunn Superman movie, I wouldn't want to see the original Mr. Terrific. Of course I wouldn't. I want to see the cool Mr. Terrific with the face mask and the T-spheres. But that's not the same thing as Jim Gordon and Perry White. Anyway, Don't Be Stupid is back, responding to Rodency. Jeffrey Mason says, please tell me you are joking that they made the Silver Surfer feeble. I did not. No, I did not. And that's the reason. That is the very specific reason why there's no hint of that in the trailer. The trailer shows you Galactus, but it doesn't show you the Silver Surfer. And that's the reason. Because the people at the studio knew that if we do that, it's the only thing anyone will talk about, and we will have empty theaters when the movie opens. So they didn't do it. As simple as that. It was pure malice. It was Lucy pulling the football away. Michael V says Fantastic Four fans is not even 1% of the target audience. Why would Hollywood care what they think? Well, I don't agree. The target audience is comic book fans, and comic book fans are the only people who know about the Fantastic Four. I don't believe that Fantastic Four fans are only 1% of a movie called The Fantastic Four. I don't believe that. It'd be one thing if the Fantastic Four had a successful movie history, but it doesn't. It has rather legendarily cursed movie history. So I think that Fantastic Four fans are a lot bigger than 1% of the movie. Not that I don't think that Hollywood cares one way or another. I think they just want more heads on the wall. The chat jumped for the very first time. But we were at Cosmic Gaze. I remember that. I remember that. Let's see if we can find here. Oh God, stop that. Sorry. There's a lot of stuff here. There we go. Steve, have you ever come across a hard copy of that terrible, self-indulgent, and delusional book written by John Wayne Gacy himself called The 34th Victim? I would feel dirty to own it, honestly. I have not. I made a point of not looking for it. I'm not going to. Why would I believe Gacy? And if he draws a map of where the bodies are, fine. Then I'll use that map and see if I can find those bodies. But I'm not going to believe anything he says just narratively. And yet, probably 80% of the so-called documentaries that I saw about him that I watched on YouTube do believe him. They take stuff that he said in those infamous prison interviews that he did and just assume them as fact. If John Wayne Gacy says to an interviewer in prison, where he is in prison for killing a whole bunch of people, if he tells an interviewer that he was never any good at sports because he had a heart condition, I want a doctor's note. I want a doctor's diagnosis. I want a medical record that says that. I'm not going to believe him if he says it. If he says anything about his victims, aside from where they are or what he did to them, if he says anything about what they said or how they acted, why would you believe him? Why on earth would you believe him? No, I didn't even seriously think about getting anything written by him. I didn't even want to watch the interviews. Except you kind of have to. I mean, I whether it's Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy, you always think I always think about the the corresponding interviews that we don't have. Dean Coral, for instance, who horrifyingly may become the focus of the next nonfiction project that I do for money, uh, was shot to death by his Renfield. So he never got to give an interview like that to the police or to curious onlookers at whatever prison he was sentenced to. He is a blank space where all that self-pitying lying would have been. But you don't want to get me talking about serial killers. Uh, AKA says, if something interrupts my attempt at veganism, then I think it'll be cheese and croissants, not meat, which hasn't been a prominent craving these past couple of days. Just don't be too hard on yourself. You are doing a lot by doing a little. Most of the people in America, I'm not 100% sure if you're in America, most of the people in America have meat as a regular part of their meal every day, several times a day. If you're not doing that, you're doing a lot already. Just don't be too hard on yourself. Definitely don't make your life miserable just because you're acknowledging that the lives of millions of other people are made miserable every day in order to make a $2 Whopper. Anyway, Anti-Gaia says, we told the Free Palestine people that he was going to do this, and they still insisted on sitting out the election. Where does this come from? Are you talking about some news story? Well, I don't. If you're talking about some recent news development, I don't know what you're talking about. But I already know the gist of it because the Free Palestine people were foolish, as I mentioned last night. Stevestream. Rodens, he says, but when they needlessly deploy these identity decimations like Silver Surfer, makes my eye roll for how obtusely they are sold for popcorn. It's if Hollywood studios have reached the point where they are proud of losing money, then the game is over. And every single person involved has to be fired and walked out of the building, and it all has to be built up from the ground up in order to change that. Just like if you reach a point with, say, the American electorate where they are proud to vote against their own self-interest, then the game is over. And the whole thing needs to be burned down and built back up again. You can't fix a system once it's gone that way. Randy Ray says hello. AK says, Steve, I hope you're doing well in the fraught times of Gilgamesh. Publicists mean well, and a lot of them, dozens and dozens of them know me, so they don't bother with the boilerplate. They're just emailing me. But I hate it when we go on autopilot. I hate it. Hope you're doing well. Is you giving your brain a few minutes where in an interaction with another person where you don't have to pay attention. I might have to pay attention in a couple of minutes, but I don't have to now. I've got the speech for this already. Maddening. Don't be stupid is again resorting to all caps. What do you guys think? I am not a you guys. You're in a chat with one person. What do you guys think of Donald Trump? I'm European, so I don't know what it's like to live under him. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, it's a communal question, not addressed to me. Street Medic says, I'm retired now, so I don't have any problems. Okay. Aslan says, my problem is how to pick up my next history book. Steve can help. Just tell me what you're in the mood for. Rodency Royalist is responding to Don't Be Stupid. Aslan is responding to Don't Be Stupid. J. Scott Phillips is here. I'm grappling with the FF trailer. The FF do not live in the Jetsons world. I think it can be set in the 1960s. That can work for me. But give us Stan and Jax NYC. You will have to wait and see. I think I'm getting a screener for the thing this week. We'll have to wait and see just what the retro look is for. Is that just a stylistic tip of the fedora by the director? It I know that MCU fans are hugely big on continuity, and the Fantastic Four fighting off Galactus in the 1960s inside the Marvel Universe continuity would detonate the whole thing. It would blow it into a million pieces. So I don't know how the movie is actually going to do that. Uh, Anti-Gaia says, Steve, do you think that Michelangelo probably had help painting the Sistine Chapel? Seems almost impossible that someone can create such a vast work of art like that. Well, he had the help of a crew. It depends on what you mean by paint the Sistine Chapel. He had the help of workers who could, paste and do rough blocking on the big cartoons that were going to be the guidelines for the finished product. But he did the whole of the actual artwork himself. Yeah. Super Hario 64. That's a name I don't know. How do you feel about Shakespeare's production with silly gimmicks? The Globe just announced Romeo and Juliet, but in the Wild West, yeehaw. I always say Shakespeare doesn't need any help. I used to say that for decades and decades. When it was just the Wild West or, outer space or anything like that. And then it started being Romeo and Juliet, but every member of the cast is a woman, or Romeo and Juliet, but the whole cast is black and it's just two people and they're swapping roles constantly and they're changing their costumes on stage. Once it became just ridiculous buffoonery, then I was a little bit more forgiving with gimmicks of setting and costume and whatnot. And also, it didn't hurt that Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet is great, and it's doing gimmickry just like that. Uh, uh, Don't Be Stupid is saying I'm not a bot. Anti-Gaia says Julian Moore's character in Magnolia is a complete wreck. Randy Ray says Magnolia is PTA's best movie by far, but his other movies are good too, except maybe There Will Be Blood. Let's see here. Lots of crosstalk. Cosmic Gaze. In your opinion, what is the best volume of poetry the Library of America has published? Probably their 2-volume set of American poetry for the 20th century or the 19th century. Or I think they do one for the 18th century, the 17th and 18th century. That their 2-volume sets of poetry are really, really good. Really well chosen. Although I don't see you people asking me lots of questions about your problems. I thought I was supposed to solve all your problems tonight. Rhodesy says, Steve, I disagree with you highly. I've seen most of Cruise's work, and though he is now the magnetic and powerful box office merchant, his performances in Eyes Wide Shut and Born on the 4th of July. Oh my God. You're not going to defend his performance in Born on the 4th of July, are you? Oh my God. Okay. You're flashing me back to the 80s. I had these arguments then, and now I'm having them again. Street Medic says Shakespeare has been adapted in hundreds of ways, and Shakespeare himself adapted his plays from other stories, so I don't have a problem with a Western version if it's done well. Rodensy says A Few Good Men and Tropic Thunder showcase the nuance he imbues into each character. There are no nuances in A Few Good Men. He has magnificent range, and there is a reason he worked with meticulous legends like Kubrick. Oh my God. Oh, he was foisted on Kubrick by the studio so that the movie wouldn't lose money. Isn't it that Kubrick was looking at tapes late at night and thought, there's a thespian trapped in that chiseled chin bone. Nuance in A Few Good Men. Oh my. I like the movie, but you are okay. All right. Tolstoy 111 is Vonnegut the ideal writer for snotty but bookish teenage boys. He's the writer that it used to be handed to them until David Foster Wallace came along, but he's not ideal for them. No. The ideal writer for them is one that doesn't close doors to future reading. How many booktubers were handed Vonnegut when they were a snotty teenager, and now essentially Vonnegut is all they read? It's the names have changed, but those doors have firmly been closed. You hand a snotty teenage boy Vonnegut, he's never going to read a woman. Almost never. Lots of doors will be closed. So he might be the one that is handed to snotty teenage boys, but he isn't ideal. He shouldn't be handed to them. Rodency is talking to someone else. Michael Lombardo, hello, good sir. Were you familiar with the Jesuit priest who died in Spain last month? No. Aslan says Fantasy BookTube also has a tendency to homogenize bookish opinions. I won't say whether or not that is connected with why they're not interested in taking in strangers, but yeah, there's very, very little in the way of disagreement, isn't there, over there? Still, it's such a friendly little sub community that, of course, I wanted to be a part of it. And I admit that exercise of consistently, concertedly trying, putting comments on all their videos, praising them, recommending them, hoping that they would let me in, the experience of that failing, very pointedly failing, was a little depressing. It was one of the many ways in the last 6 or 7 years where I've seen the limits of BookTube. Let's see here. Anti-Guy says, I think it would be better if Donahue, if Don't Be Stupid, cut it with all of the with all caps chats. Well, maybe they do that in Europe. They're different in Europe. Don't Be Stupid says, Rodency Royalist, what do you think about? Oh, you're asking somebody else what they think about the Bible as literature. Okay. Hi, this is getting rich. AKA says, I saw a certain Steve Donahue blurbed on the cover of Crime and Punishment in London's biggest bookstore. Might have had to head back and pick up a copy. If you head back to that bookstore and you buy the Cat's translation of Crime and Punishment with my name on the cover above the authors, when you slap it down on the register at the front, say, I'm buying this, but I want you to know I think this Donahue guy's a jerk. Randy Ray is back. Cat's Cradle is great, but all of Vonnegut's other novels are overrated. And yes, I've read his entire oeuvre. I was younger then. Rodents, he says, Steve, I need your advice to solve my problem. Yes, I'm here to solve problems. What is the best English translation of Faust, in your opinion? I have only read Kaufman. That's not a problem. That's not a problem that you have. But Kaufman is fine. Colombian Thunder says, yes, I was referring to the Fantastic Four posters being made by AI earlier in the stream. I'm sure that the next Fantastic Four movie will be made by AI. But who was it? I forget the YouTuber's name. Chapo, I think it's Talking with Chapo or something like. It's an older guy. That's unusual. He's an older guy. His thumbnail was an ideal casting that had Ernest Borgnine as the Thing. That would have been interesting, but what does he say? He's not a neck-bearded fascist, but in the middle of talking about the Fantastic Four trailer, he says that Pedro Pascal reminds him of an illegal alien. What am I supposed to make about that? What? I'm not being a blue-haired, blue checkmark scold when I say, what can that comment be other than racism? And that was the mildest version of that kind of thing that I saw. Anti-Guy says, Vonnegut tries too clever. It's annoying. I'd rather read Ray Bradbury than Vonnegut. Matthew Beatty says, you missed one of the Fantasy BookTube prerequisites. You must say something about a Philip Chase book in every one of your videos. I don't think Philip Chase requires that. He seems like a thoroughly decent guy. But I don't know. It could be that you have to have the homogeneity of opinion that was mentioned earlier. I don't know. It was a failure, definitely. If I put an enthusiastic comment on the Brothers Gwynn, for instance, on a video of theirs, they will acknowledge it. They very seldom respond, but they will acknowledge it. It's not like they just ignore it. In a lot of fantasy channels, I would put a comment, a question or a comment in their comments field, and every single comment would have a little heart, except mine. It would just be that one thing would just be, I don't see this. It just isn't there at all. And of course, there's Jimmy Nuts from the Fantasy Network. Was genuinely welcoming, but that's the one exception. Let's see here. Rodency is talking to someone else. Michael Lombardo, I watched the preview trailer of FF. They've got the thing visually right. Do they? Do they? He's the shortest person on the team. Maybe that's just a visual that I got wrong. Maybe in the actual movie, he'll be big. But he should be big. I think he should be bigger than he was. He has a waistline, for Pete's sake, in the movie. But he looks good. He looks really good. But then again, I thought the Michael Chiklis film thing looked really good. Don't be stupid responding to somebody else. J. Scott Phillips, I've enjoyed a few of Vonnegut's books, but I think the best work was in Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School. SM3, thanks for the sage advice, Steve. I stopped myself from buying the entire Barth collection and called it a day at Letters. Even Letters, you're going to be wondering. But there'll be parts of it where you're not wondering. There'll be parts of it where you're thinking, this is genuinely good. But nothing after that. Those parts go away after that. It's really sad. It was really sad to watch. And some of the earlier stuff, oh my, oh my. And in the mythical, the now legendary second half of the 20th century fiction canon that I always threatened to make, the Saltweed Factor would be on that list. It's that good. Stephen Bronstein says, would you say that an awareness and acceptance of one's own shortcomings is a type of intelligence or rare trait in itself? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And well, I don't agree with acceptance of your shortcomings. Most shortcomings can be improved. But awareness of them, it's rare to the point of being almost non-existent in the 21st century. Strawberry says, Steve, I heard someone say The Road was the greatest novel of all time. I immediately banished them to the Shadow Realm. Simply show them the way to my videos. That's all. Show them the way to my demolition of The Road. I did it piece by piece, bit by bit, and I did it only based on what was actually on the page. So that if you are a dude bro and you are loving that book and defending it to the skies, by the time you watch my videos on the subject, your defense will take the form of, well, I don't care if it doesn't have a good plot. Well, I don't care if it has a plot at all. Well, I don't care if there are no good dialogue. I don't care if the characters are any good. You will have my arguments, my criticisms of the book are not answerable. They're not opinion. They're not feeling. They're not answerable. The book doesn't work on any of its levels. And I think that is why I believe the rumor that was passed around to me years and years and years ago that those videos made their way to Cormac McCarthy and ruined his day. And if that happened, I'm happy that happened. Colombian Thunder says, any new movies you've been enjoying lately besides Nosferatu and Megalopolis? Well, the mindless craze of Nosferatu and Megalopolis just bouncing between the two of them has faded. And nothing yet has taken its place. I have a bunch of screeners that I haven't even looked at. But I'm sure that one of those will take its place, but nothing's happened yet. Or you'd be hearing me just obsess about it in my videos. Rhodesy says, Steve, not everybody can pull in nearly 200 people a night from across the globe, including the midnight denizens of your lounge here like me in lousy Britain. Well, no, I'm not. If that's an allusion to me not being welcomed by the rest of BookTube, I'm not complaining about. I'm not denigrating what I have. I know I have a very, very, to use the sappy word, I have a very, very good community. We give each other crap. We talk all the time. We send each other things. I send you things. You send me things. We text all the time. We Voxer all the time. We email all the time. All that has nothing to do, even with the comments on my videos. That has nothing to do with BookTube. That did not stop during the time when I was gone from making videos. I'm not denigrating that at all. I'm not pining for something, in other words. I'm just noticing it. That's all. I guess a little wistfully noticing it. People show up, they make a new channel, they don't have whatever it is that's disinclining people from embracing me, and they get embraced. And all of us started BookTube hoping that would happen. A version of that has definitely happened with me. So I'm not saying, oh no, poor me. Michael Lombardo, are there enough superhero films that have pleased you to make a top 10 list? Oh, I don't know. I doubt it. I doubt it. Top 10 moments in superhero films. Certainly. I could certainly do that. Top 10 moments. Top 10 sequences, for instance. I could definitely do that. I mean, look at just Marvel Comics. Look at the heyday of the MCU. There are some great moments, even in dull movies. And a couple of the movies are just good from start to finish, but not all of them. Most of them are not. But the whole movie, no. Oh no, I don't think so. I don't think so. Like for instance, every time somebody comes here for wine and calzones, they get shown a few discrete superhero scenes, whether they want to see them or not. But those scenes are taken from movies that are largely unwatchable. So, so no, I don't think so. AK says, Steve, is Norman Collins' London Belongs to Me any good? I saw it at the bookstore today, and it piqued my interest, especially as I am a Londoner. Does it capture the energy of the city at all? It didn't do anything for me, but you ought to get it. If it was at a used bookstore and it was cheap, you ought to get it. If you're a Londoner, you ought to get it. You certainly ought to read it. Don't Be Stupid is back. I used to be a Christian, but it literally seems irrational to believe such things. My brother is trying to lure me into it again due to the trends revolving around becoming religious. Strange times. Uh, well, you see that's uh, one of my infinite number of objections to the whole thing is that if it were real, you wouldn't need to be lured into it. If it were real, it would be self-evident. Real things are evident, and it's not. Instead, it's not even hidden. It's deeply cryptic. You have to be lured into it when that shouldn't be true. SM3 says, now if I can find everything Percival Everett wrote at my used bookstore, one can only hope. I am not Sidney Poitier. Anti Gaia says, Steve, do you think that picture of Elon's cyber truck on fire next to Trump's building will be on the cover of the few nonfiction books? I doubt it. It's critical of both Trump and Elon Musk. I don't think there'll be books like that. Uh, Jonah Tron says, missed you, Steve. Thanks for swooping in to save us all from this chaos with a bracing dose of sanity. And yet, this video was all about me solving your problems. I've heard precious few problems. Instead, I got a factoid question about row F number 5, best translation of Faust. No problems. People aren't suffering from erectile dysfunction. I can't help you with anything. Uh, Rodensy says, Steve, a life truly long enough to cultivate and feed all of one's interests within reason. Is life truly long enough? No, of course not. Of course not. I know you are only 28 and 6 years older than me, but alas, still a tad older. No, it's not anywhere near long enough. No, I always say, and I stole it from a much better writer. You're a spark struck from an anvil. You fly through the air and hit the straw, and you go out, and that's it. That's exactly how long you're here. You're here for about 10 minutes. That's not long enough to do almost anything. So you have to be really, really enthusiastic about the things you do. Because you're never coming back, you're never being reassembled, you're not going anywhere. There's no part of you that's going anywhere. So you have to live life with gusto. How's that for a manospheric rubric? Street Medic. I can't do a booktube channel. One day I would talk about history, next Greek philosophy, and then I would talk about ZF set theory as a solution to Russell's paradox, then finish with the Hardy Boys. Well, you'd be embraced by this little corner of booktube. James at Quaint and Curious Volumes just today did a video in which I was nodding along while he said it. That the type of booktubers that he most likes are the ones who are just doing their own thing. I agree completely. AK says, I've recently become obsessed with only buying books that have floppy spines. I can't stand the stiff spines, which crack instantly and aren't as pleasant to hold. Columbian Thunder. I miss when big movies felt sincere. Hell of a lot of indie movies seem to function under some semblance of irony, even when they take themselves seriously. Sincerity. Oh God, you're in the wrong century. Rasmus says, "I'll see you in El Salvador, Steve." I don't know what all this talk of El Salvador is. I've heard variations on that kind of talk from a number of Americans who just don't seem to think that that any kind of penury or servitude is coming here. That people are going to have to be shipped somewhere else. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand that at all. But let's see here. The chat jumped. Let's see. Oh my God. It was El Salvador. I know that. Oh, look at all these comments, though. Jeez Louise. There we go. Leo Percar is next. Hello, Steve. Do you think a new Superman to work on the big screen, they would have to change his profession since journalism isn't respected anymore, at least the mainstream kind? Well, obviously not going to. If you saw the trailers, their Clark Kent is the Superman trailer is very, very lazy. A couple of things in it that weren't, but very, very lazy. That establishing shot of someone walking down a street in New York, and they're literally 1 million people, and they're all exactly shoulder to shoulder, and they're blasting everybody apart. The hero is squished in between them. It's such a Hollywood version of what New York is like. But no, they're not going to change. The James Gunn is at least too much of a traditionalist to do that. Andrew says, I was pleased to see Origins of Marvel Comics on your best reprints end of the year list. My only quibble is the art reproduction isn't always as crisp as the original. Oh, I had a couple of quibbles with that book. The art reproduction could be much crisper than it was. It's a tiny bit better than the original one from 100 years ago. I had other quibbles with it. Mainly the biggest change on the cover. The two big changes on the cover. First of all, the cover is no longer by John Romita. You've got a painted cover by John Romita. You don't change it. You don't hire Alex Ross to do the cover. Even if it's an homage to the Romita, you don't change it. You keep the John Romita cover. And second, these characters are created by Stan Lee. Not Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Stan Lee. But anyway, Monet says hello. Anand says, hi, Steve. I've been watching your channel for over a few months now, and because of your advice, been keeping a journal for over 3 months, and I'm just finishing off A Book of One's Own by Thomas Mallon. Isn't that book good? Boy, oh boy. That is so good. But I'm glad to hear this about your journal. Chuck everything into it. Don't write for an audience. You'll be fine. You'll love it. You'll love the results. Coffee says, just read Joseph Mitchell's Joe Gould's Secret. Wish I knew Gould in person, a funny bohemian from the 40s and 50s Greenwich Village. Any recommendations of similar characters? Well, that would imply that we both like the book. I don't have any recommendations of similar characters, no. Rhodesy says, Steve, regarding your point about Gordon, I think permutation can be acceptably made like the former. Okay, you could write English, right? We're just talking. You could write English. And just for your information, no one who's talking and writing English uses word permutation. Many great works / plays feature ambitious choices, and it can enrich thematic intentions sometimes. Okay, I don't have any idea what that means. I don't think you have any idea what that means, but taken on its surface just as English language, there are no thematic intentions that are enriched by simply changing someone's skin color. That doesn't happen unless you were changing Rosa Parks' skin color or something like that. Perry White is the editor of the Daily Planet. The Daily Planet is not the Daily Planet is a major metropolitan newspaper, and Perry White is a 70-year-old character, and he's not black. There's no thematic intention that is enriched or changed in any way by race swapping him. None at all. It's just pandering. That's all it is pandering. I love the actor who's playing him. I'll probably love the job he does. I love the last black Perry White, but it's just pandering. That's not here. If you want an audience if you want to give an audience something that they'll love, then either make something or find something that is what you want to show them. But anyway, AK says, Steve, roughly how long is Leaves of Grass? I have really slim Penguin, but I'm seeing way bigger editions out in bookstores. Do I maybe have an abridgment? Well, Whitman wrote a number of different versions of the thing. If I were you, I would get a nice big long one. On the chance that you end up liking it, you should have the longest version that he ever did. Rodency is responding to someone else. Street Medic says, the only thing about reading a book by a serial killer is the psychological insight you might possibly glean from it, but that's not guaranteed. No, in fact, in Gacy's case, it's guaranteed that you won't. Because by the time he wrote his book, he was fully enamored of the idea that he had multiple personalities and that they barely talked with each other and didn't know what each other was doing, which made it so that if I had been taking his interviews, If I'd been the police and taking the interviews where he was taking that line of crap, I'd have decked him. I'd have probably decked him anyway, but I'd have decked him when he did that. God, the moment in one of his interviews where I think he's talking to his lawyers, but it was taped. And he's talking about his final victim, Rob Peast, whose disappearance actually caused the investigation that found Gacy and got him put away forever. Rob Peast was, by all accounts, a great kid, a typical all-American great kid who was lured to Gacy's home and brutally killed. And we don't have to talk about serial killers, but when Gacy's talking about it, he's talking about he handcuffed the kid, and the kid was terrified, wet himself, was crying, knew that in the last half hour of his life, he knew that he had stumbled into hell and couldn't get out, kept saying he wanted to go home. And Gacy talks about strangling him slowly, so slowly that in the process of strangling him, he actually took a phone call with Rob Peast just standing there, knowing that he is being murdered, knowing that there's no chance at all for him to live. He's not going to go home that night. He's not going to see anybody that he knows, knowing all of that. And in the interview, the lawyer says, in addition to all of that, did you rape him? And Gacy says, no, I didn't. But maybe one of my alternate personalities did. God, just opened up a door to hell and let him drop right in. And if somebody like that, you're not going to get any insights in a book that they write. But anyway, Danger Kid is back. Steve, my current trouble is writer's block. Can you help me solve it? Perhaps I just need a good scolding. I'm just shy of 100K words into a manuscript and have lost steam in the past week. There is no such thing as writer's block. Unless you're having a schemic episode, there's no such thing as writer's block, and you're not. You're fine, or you wouldn't be leaving comments on the Stevestream. There's no such thing as writer's block. You can write because you can physically control the muscles of your hand. You can make the synaptic connections between your brain and your writing hand. You can write words on paper. You can type words on a screen. So you're not blocked. So you should do that. You should do that. Just grind your keel across the coral and get it done. Just keep doing it until the feeling, the tide that floats you and makes you feel like you're not blocked, returns. That feeling will return, but there's no guarantee that it's always going to be there in every stage of writing a manuscript. All you're at here is a stage in your writing of your manuscript where that feeling is absent. That doesn't mean you can't keep writing. If I'm making myself, I might not be making myself clear. I've tried to make this clear for decades. Every once in a while, when you're writing a manuscript, you are going to just scrape the bottom, and you're going to feel, I don't want to do this. I have no momentum. I don't know where I'm going. Just not feeling it anymore. But you are not blocked. You are still able to write. So write. Make yourself write, and that feeling will return. Rhodes, he says, I was responding to somebody else. Jonathan Matthews, your view on the gap between Shakespeare and his contemporaries, Johnson, Fletcher, Beaumont, Middleton, etc. People like Sidney and Spenser are completely obscure. Why is this rich tradition ignored? Oh, because Shakespeare is great theater. None of the Shakespeare plays to the people, plays to the crowd, and there are a lot of Shakespeare plays. So if you do a Shakespeare retrospective, you're not just doing the same 5 plays. There are a lot of Shakespeare plays, and a lot of them work miraculously well, which isn't true for any of the other authors that you name. The dramatists that you name are dated. Even Middleton, who's, I think, the closest thing to Shakespeare, that there's some element of elementary universal genius that just isn't there. In Middleton, in a couple of plays, especially The Changeling, there is a bit of that, and you suddenly find yourself holding your breath. But Shakespeare can make you hold your breath for a whole play, long scenes at a time, and no one else in his age could do that. So I don't. First of all, I don't know that the tradition is ignored. Those dramatists, their plays just don't live. They've become dated. So, same reason that we don't stage Edwardian plays, even though Lines Around the Block, when they first came out, Shakespeare has just managed to avoid that. No, I'm not. Just because I'm not sure who wrote the Shakespeare plays doesn't mean I'm denying the genius in them. Uh, Dylan says, even ignoring any ethical concerns, it always strikes me as a strange that our fellow Americans eat meat 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and then wonder why their bodies give out at 44. Well, that's another element of this that, first of all, I don't ever try to convince anybody of anything when it comes to their personal habits. But another element is that the, the meat that you're eating, unless you're unless you're a YouTube influencer who's making a point of eating, poached elk meat or something like that. If you're eating commercial meat, you're eating steroids. You're eating all sorts of drugs that do not have the safety standards that they have in America for human consumption. You can pump a pig or a cow or a chicken full of those drugs without any FDA inspector saying this might be unhealthy for them. And it's in their meat. It irradiates their meat. So there's no amount of cooking that can save you from that. You're consuming all of that stuff. It's a very, very valid point, I guess is what I'm saying. Jim says, hi, Steve. Hi. Street Medic says, I think Donald Trump belongs in the same Supermax prison as Elon Musk. Anti Guy says, I'm digging into Max Hastings' Cuban Missile Crisis book tonight after the stream. Might also want to watch the movie 13 Days. No idea what streaming service it's on, but don't miss that movie. Definitely don't. You'll wince at Kevin Costner's attempt at a Boston accent, but don't miss Bruce Greenwood as JFK. Just don't. Do yourself a favor and make sure you see that movie. Um, don't be stupid is back. Nobody answered me in regards to Trump. Well, you didn't ask me. You asked guys, the whole crowd. Francisco says, hi, Steve. Just saying hello. I'm happy Frida and you are doing more live streams. The being is right here next to me. She's actually captured a hand, so I'm not really allowed to move that hand. Uh, uh, don't be stupid says, I'm also asking you about Trump, Steve. Oh, that's nice. Very nice of you. Steve Bronstein says, I have a problem. It's misophonia, a condition that creates a sense of unbearable rage, disgust, and fight or flight response from certain regular mouth, speaking, and breathing sounds from loved ones. Okay. Well, I was thinking more about problems that are real as opposed to made up. But I guess that will do. Rhodesy says, Steve, I am personally in everlasting awe of Leonardo da Vinci. Would you care to name a few individuals of similar ilk that you hold in high, awe-inspiring regard? I don't hold da Vinci in high, awe-inspiring regard. I appreciate a lot of what he did, but I don't appreciate a lot of what he was or a lot of what he didn't do. Uh, I, I don't think that high, awe-inspiring regard is good. The only person in all of recorded human history for whom you should be feeling that is me. Cosmic Gaze says, Steve, forgive me if you have answered this, but since you seem to be into books about Shakespeare that question whether or not he wrote the plays, what is your personal opinion on the matter? Uh, I don't believe it. I'm amazed that no one's ever asked this question, but I don't believe it. I think there is a fatal mismatch between the biography of William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon and the plays themselves. A fatal mismatch, a mismatch that cannot be identified by collaboration or by the Magic Tavern where he overheard all this stuff or anything else that cannot be bridged by that. There is a fatal disconnect between the man and the work. And so something fundamental is wrong here. And that does not make me a crackpot. I know the historical record as well as anybody. And that does not make me a crackpot. You have to wish to see it to see it. Otherwise, no, it's just not there. But anyway, that doesn't mean I have a candidate. I have no candidate. All I'm saying is the facts of the matter and the artwork fundamentally do not line up. They just fundamentally do not. And not in terms of, is the artwork beautiful, but the person was horrible. I'm talking about simply the means of producing the artwork just isn't there. Just isn't there at all. If you go to 1910 and you tell me that the trundle that comes up from a mine in Wales and the men and boys in it are all black faced, and they've all got their, their lunch pails and whatnot. And when the iron gates are lifted up, they all come trudging out. They're exhausted. They haven't been in the daylight. This time they've been down in the earth. You tell me that one of those dead-eyed little boys, a 10-year-old boy who's been working all day in a mine, he's black from head to toe. His eyes look supernatural because of the only bright thing on him. You tell me that he wrote the plays of George Bernard Shaw. Well, I wouldn't believe it. It's not a question of snobbery or the vagaries of genius. It's just not possible. It's not possible that boy could do it. Anyway, Strawberry says, did you ever read Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett? An hour and 15 minutes. Actually, it's longer than an hour and 15 minutes. An hour and 15 minutes tonight, but it's actually been 4 Stevestreams. So probably a total of 8 hours that we've gone. Without have you read question. Strawberry, if you're new here, that is a have you read question. It's a bad one too. Take a step back from being in the chat and look at what you're watching. Look at what you're watching. An absolutely avid reader, a more avid reader than anyone you have ever met or ever heard about, who has been an avid reader for longer than your parents have been alive. Every day, every minute, reading new releases in the American book market. Every day, every minute for decades and decades and decades. Look at what you're watching. You have just asked what you're watching if he read Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Well, okay. You're curious to know my thoughts. I thought Pillars of the Earth was wonderful. I like most of Ken Follett, but his historical stuff is great. Okay. All right. Let's just move on. My Hat, My Gandhi. I just started your Western Canon Starter Kit vids, reading through NIV of Matthew on Bible Gate. Sorry, I'm still. I will focus here. Really enjoying it and looking forward to Homer after the Bible. That's good. Very good. Rodesy says, also, is Montaigne a very tough read? No. Get the Penguin Classic modern translation. You'll be fine. Street Medic says, I started the year rereading The Story of Civilization. I'm currently 300 pages into Volume 2. J. Scott Phillips, oh boy, the mail just now delivered my New Yorker Century of Fiction. Only this Stevestream is keeping me from diving into it, so let's wrap it up. My big quandary with the anniversary books is the volume of poetry. I don't know. I don't know what. I obviously want to review it, but my review of the fiction anthology was a rave, as the aggregator sites call it. My review of the poetry volume will be a pan, in a way, of a kind. Wine and Calzone says, Fantastic Four comic book has deep bench of characters. Film could have gone with Frankie Ray's Nova, an actual female herald. Right. They could have done that. Anti-Guy says, Tropic Thunder is a riot. Colin says, do you have any recommended translations of the Quran? Annotated editions would be preferred. I just read the Penguins. The same guy's been revising his Penguin translation for like 100 years. Wine and Calzone says, you're back. No problems tonight. No, there's been no problems. No background noise. No spinning wheel. No volume problems. No nothing. The only problem happened a few chats ago. I'm going to recover. I promise I'm going to recover. Rodesy says, I never said A Few Good Men is nuanced. I said his performance and choices are in that and very differentiated from the others I listed. The film itself is pulpy. Cruise inhabits the role with skill. No. There's no role to inhabit. No, no, no. First of all, you did imply that A Few Good Men was nuanced and that his performance in it was nuanced. It's not. There's no nuance anywhere in the movie, including his performance. It's just, I mean, you're a fan of his acting, fine, great, but uh, don't be stupid to respond to someone else. Anti Guy says we went from having a brilliant power broker in the White House to having Chauncey Gardner mixed with Hannibal Lecter. No Chauncey Gardner. No Chauncey Gardner involved here. Monet Doyle says, I'm reading a book called One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. Again, I don't know that author. You always pick authors I don't know. Cosmic A says, would you recommend the Briggs translation of War and Peace? I found the Garnet translation awful. I could not stand the untranslated French that is in the Peviar and Volkonsky. Okay, well, we might be far enough apart aesthetically so that I wouldn't be able to help you. The Constance Garnet translation is not awful. But maybe the Briggs is the way to go for you. Isn't the Briggs the Penguin Classic Deluxe? I think it is, isn't it? Maybe you could try that and see. Maybe he hits the right balance. Terror Billy says, hi, Steve. I randomly got Orley Farm by Trollope. Do you consider this one of his best? I have only read The Way We Live Now and enjoyed it. Oh, well, I love most of Trollope. Orley Farm is really, really effective and does something that Trollope does actually a couple of times in some of his major novels. He raises a question. Did so-and-so do X or did so-and-so not do X? He raises a question, a mystery. In some novels, he decides to just tantalize you with that. And of course, the conclusion of the book will be the revelation of whether or not X did the mystery. And in Orley Farm, he just dumps it on you. He just dumps the conclusion, the answer on you in the middle of the book. And it doesn't slow things down at all. You're avidly reading. It's a very interesting narrative choice. Dylan says, is there a good book on the history of poetry or perhaps a reference work that provides examples of different forms and meters? I want to help a friend get into poetry, but I'm no teacher. Well, showing them a book on forms and meters would be about the last way to do that. I'd give them poetry instead, and not a book on the history of poetry either. This is not school. Why not give them a poetry anthology? But Schmidt's book, Lives of the Poets, is really, really good. But you'd be handing this person an 800-page book of history and biography. Tolstoy 111 says, the idea of Vonnegut being a terminal point for readers reminds me of Harold Bloom quoting Stephen King. Kids who read Harry Potter today will grow up to read Stephen King, and said he fully agrees. Francisco says, I totally agree. The Scientologist only has some charisma and a pretty-ish face. Definitely not a good actor. Aslan says, your comments on the last Fantasy Network stream were funny. Jimmy seemed to find them so, and that's great. Although you could see the stiffening in the comments field. You could see the stiffening when I showed up. Jimmy gets that when I'm saying mean comments about him, I'm being loving and friendly. But Random Reading Pathways says, with contemporary fiction plagued by so many of the issues you discuss, are there any encouraging trends you see or things to look for to try to pick winners? The winners are still out there, but only because the writers of books that are genuine and real have largely not yet all died. Couldn't help but notice that last year and a little bit the year before, that it's just these old traditionalist people who are deciding to actually craft a novel and who know what they're doing. And the new generation doesn't need to know what it's doing because it's been told that it's great from when it was in high school. Not for its writing, but for its grievance politics, for the boxes it clicks on the progressive stack. That is a death knell to a genre. If you are encouraging a whole generation of writers that everything they do is perfect just because they got out of bed in the morning, then no, I don't. And in other words, the answer to your question is no, I don't see any encouraging trends. Let's see here. Dylan says, a guidance counselor recommended Vonnegut to me as a freshman. I liked the book, but I never had any interest in reading more. I suppose I was lucky in that regard. Aslan says, my biggest problem is insomnia. Can you cure me, Steve? Breathing, breath control is a surefire cure for insomnia. Your body knows what to do with regular breathing, with a regular, calm, dark environment and regular breathing. Your body knows what to do with that and will do it. Let's see here. Joshua says, "Hi, Steve. Any short story anthology recommendations for someone new to short stories? Something like a canon of the essentials." Uh, well, any anthology produced before 2010 will be fine. Um, I don't mean to trumpet him, but for instance, if you could find a used copy of the best short stories of the century by John Updike, edited by John Updike, there's a perfect place. Big thing. You are bound in the course of those 1,000 pages to find at least a few writers that you want to pursue. Uh, Rodency says, Steve, a problem. How do I stop missing Vincent Price? Seriously, I need your wisdom here. I was born 9 years after he died, but still advise me. Uh, you don't miss him. You never knew him, as you say yourself. You have his legacy. There you go. Just do that until the fit passes. Uh, Damien says, thoughts on Hobbes Leviathan. Rhodesy says, Dear Steve, how does one contend with the ravaging forces of life's ruthlessness? You are among the most comfortable human beings who has ever lived in the history of the world. So maybe you ought not to be talking about life's ruthlessness. Maybe, just maybe you ought not to be. Street Medic says, so if you avoid eating meat for ethical reasons, should you also avoid leather-bound books? Uh, well, the industries are different, right? I mean, there's no booming industry for leather-bound books. It's minuscule compared uh, to the meat industry, and also the leather comes from people who are already dead. They're not raised for that purpose. They're killed for their meat. And the leather is just a byproduct that can be sold by the factories that kill them for their meat. It, they're not really equivalent. I, I the leather binding of books is a lot different from 8 million people every year dying of torture. That's rather different, I think. Cosmic Gaze says, "Am I pretentious for loving Hart Crane's poetry?" Yes, but you're still welcome here. Rodensy says, "What is your opinion on my moniker?" I don't have one on your moniker. Terror Billy. I saw a book by Joanna Trollope on a shelf. I looked her up on Wikipedia and found out she is Anthony Trollope's fifth generation niece. Are there any worthwhile books by her? A couple of them I have found to be worthwhile. I don't think I a critic of hers 35 years ago said her novels were so much better if she didn't expect you to think they were good. And I saw a lot of worth in that. I saw a lot of, I'm showing up and punching a time clock, so I deserve my union dues. Uh, but what was the name? Was it The Spanish Lover? I thought was very good. A couple of others. She's no Anthony Trollope, but if you can find a copy of her book like in a thrift store, pick one and see. You might develop a taste. She had a devoted readership. Uh, Don't Be Stupid says Hobbes Leviathan has many mistakes within it, especially the first part. Avoid. Uh, Street Medic says you shouldn't limit yourself because others may think you're pretentious. I'll be pretentious all day long if I want to. Well, I'm not limiting myself, first of all, but this 21st century trend of I'll be whatever I want and I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I'm not going to do that. Constance says, is there any David Foster Wallace novel worth reading? No. Colombian Thunder says, I remember encountering Slaughterhouse 5 in my house when I was around 7. No one knew where it came from, and it was near falling apart. I tried 5 times to read it for the next 10 years. AKA says, Steve, any advice for making friends? Acquaintances, I've got them locked down, but I feel I get lazy when it comes to building a close relationship, and that obviously results in a bit of loneliness. Uh, the laziness there is the key. You hit on the key yourself. Most people, especially young people in the 21st century, do not realize that friendships require upkeep. They think if it requires upkeep, well, then it can't be real. It requires upkeep on both parts, 50-50. Uh, Otherwise, what are you expecting? If you don't upkeep it, if you aren't both working to upkeep it, then it is just an acquaintanceship. Of course, friendship is also a matter of chemistry, and the tumblers falling into place just right, which means there's an element of luck involved. Plenty of people do understand that friendships need to be upkept, but all they ever get are people the closest they can get are acquaintances. There's a bit of luck involved as well, unless you get a dog. Unless you get a dog. You go to your shelter, to a high kill shelter where somebody's going to die this coming Saturday, and you save his life. You'll be buying friendship, and it will be real. It won't just be gratitude. It'll be gratitude for the first week. Then it will be genuine friendship. But anyway, Aslan says the dialogue in the road was the worst part for me. It made it so laborious. Don't be stupid, says David Foster Wallace is not good. Avoid him. The Arab Cowboy says the road was traumatizing for me to read. Constance says, did you enjoy Atkinson's Life After Life? Okay, it's another have you read question. Oh. It's not as bad as Pillars of the Earth, but it's another have you read question of a major author, her most famous book, on the paperback of which I am blurbed by name. I did read Life After Life, and I did enjoy it. And if you find a paperback, you will see proof of that. Rodensy says, Steve, do you like Wim Wenders films? What do you think? Take a wild guess. And have you seen his latest Perfect Days? I loved it. Yes, I loved it. Directors don't matter. J Studio says, we're reading Crime and Punishment, and one of my colleagues keeps spoiling it casually. Very irritating. Jason Ramore says, Steve, I would love to see you on Jeopardy, that Library of Alexandria host. On Jeopardy, that Library of Alexandria. I don't subscribe to Alan's channel anymore because I am absolutely an antimatter person to him. I could leave 1,000 comments. He wouldn't acknowledge any of them. Doesn't want me to watch his channel. I don't watch his videos. Does he have a regular Jeopardy feature? Is that what you're talking about? Wine and Calzone says, don't know if you watched the show, but Bill Maher had your guy Dan Jones on as a guest in the latest episode talking about Henry V. I don't watch the show. Jenny says, my abusive ex-favorite's author was Vonnegut, so I'm thinking I should consider Vonnegut a red flag if I ever go on a date again. I might be serious. I don't know. A minor red flag, but definitely. And the reason why it would be a minor red flag, you need look no further than what's in Vonnegut's book about women. It's not like you need to read heavily between the lines. If that appeals to a man, that's a minor red flag, definitely. The Arab Cowboy is responding to someone else. Echo Fall says, I never really got poetry, but I read Cascando by Beckett and had a real effect on me. If you're familiar with the poem, do you know any poetry of a similar vibe? I've been chasing that high ever since. I don't know what high you're chasing. It'd be perilous for me to make a recommendation. Chimerica Industry says the fantasy community is notoriously intimidated by 20-something influencers with square jawlines and washbone ab. I don't think they're intimidated. I don't know what it is. They don't really want anything to do with me. I made that experiment once, won't do it again. I got friendship with Jimmy Nuts out of it. That's going to have to be good enough. I freely admit I would have liked to have a friendship with all of them. Think I wouldn't like Voxring with Philip Chase all day long? Of course I would. Just not interested. They're just not interested. Rodensy says, have you listened to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's music and do you like it? No, I have not. All John Philip Sousa, all the time. Don't Be Stupid says Julius Caesar or Alexander. No idea. What does that mean? In chess? In bed? I have no idea what that means. Rodensy says, a problem. How to stop myself from aging like you? Eternally 28 is a little unfair. Oh, it's not unfair. Who else would you want to be eternally 28 other than me? I mean, if it was going to happen to anybody, it should be me. You're older every time I see you. Constance says, I am partial to Tobey Maguire's second Spider-Man film. Well, nobody's perfect. Street Medic says Alexander, but JC up there too. No idea. No idea. Rhodesy says, and you beat Jesus at his own game by 5 years. Anti-Guy says, I need to just fork out the cash and go see Nosferatu. I don't need to buy a first edition trade paperback edition of State of Denial by Woodward in pristine shape when I have the flippin' ebook. No, you don't. No, you don't. You could just shell out the money for Nosferatu. Constance says, my problems are kind of embarrassing. Well, if they're too embarrassing for a chat, then email me. I will solve your problems. Dylan says, on the topic of religion, I know you follow atheist YouTube somewhat. What do you make of Alex O'Connor and his seeming shift into the right-wing griftosphere? It was inevitable. It will get worse. And it will come. I made this prediction years ago. People thought I was absolutely crazy. It was inevitable. It will get worse. And it will culminate with, say it all with me, him finding religion. It was never going to go any other way. Never. It was never going to go any other way. So, but check back with me. You're all howling. All you Alex O'Connor fans are howling. So check back with me in a couple of years. 2 years is at the most is all it will need to prove that Steve is once again right about everything. But that made the chat jump. Just that simple comment about Alex O'Connor made the chat jump. Oh God. Here, let's. It was griftosphere was the word that I was looking for. So, that should be easy to find, right? God, there are a lot of comments. There we go. Leo Percara. Well, I have a math problem. Better than a meth problem. Can you help me with that, Steve? I didn't think so. Check and mate. Don't be stupid says, I spoke to Alex O'Connor a few days ago. Rodensy says, Steve, I have now inherited an advanced existential crisis after your answer with the spark and anvil. Fix that now because you have made the original problem worse. That's a problem I can't fix. You are here for 5 minutes. And you want to call that depressing. It is depressing. Of course, I wish you could be here for 1,000 years. I wish everybody could be here for 1,000 years. Life is so wonderful. It is so interesting. You hate the idea that it's going to be going on after you. All of it that happened before you can at least read about. But all the stuff that's coming after you, there's no way for you to know that. You're just going to miss it. You're not going to be here for it. That's depressing, and there's no way around that. But there is a compensating thing, and that is stop wasting time. Stop wasting the 10 minutes that you get. Stop doom scrolling. Stop wasting time. That at least is a tiny compensation. J. Scott Phillips, I have a problem. We have rain in our forecast, and I don't believe it. Can a blob watch settle the bet? One of my hands is claimed. Completely claimed. It is underneath the bean's chin. So we're going to have to do this blob watch one-handed. But when Scotty wants a blob watch, that's what we do. So let us see. We'll do the whole of the United States. Oh, yeah, you are getting rain, aren't you? Oh, my, yes, you are the only blob in town. You are the only blob in town. You are getting rain, definitely. But you notice, I'm going to do this. Ooh, you notice this upper river there. You can see it, right? It's the same as we saw, only it's more advanced. Just a roof of storms over the top of the United States, on the border between the United States and Canada. Just a roof of stuff moving along a bow through the upper Midwest and headed to New England. And that pattern is just staying in place. Even your rain is going to feed that pattern of just these. I can't do it with one hand. You see what I'm talking about. There's a roof to this pattern. No, I can't do it. But it is going to result in a steady stream of rain and snow for Boston at periodic intervals until that is over, until that pattern is over. Rodensy says, you did not solve the problem, you explicated it. Oh, Lord, perhaps the problem is squaring the circle. Well, no, I can't solve the problem of you being mortal. Sorry, I didn't mean to say I could solve all problems then. That I can't solve. But I didn't just explicate it. I gave you a way out. The only way, the only compensation is to not waste time. It's bad enough that you go unconscious as a drooling blob on your pillow for 9 hours out of every 24. That's bad enough. The rest of the time, you should be leaping into it. And if you have elements in your life that are disinclining you from leaping into them, change those elements. Change them right away. You get up every day, you swing your feet around the bed, and the first thing you notice is the flab around your midsection. Start exercising. Start running. You look at starting running, you think, where am I going to work it in? And I'm out of shape completely. Start with walking. Work your way up to running. By summer, you'll be running. And by Christmas or Thanksgiving, that rim of flab will be gone. Swing your feet around the bed when you're done being a comatose blob and look at the things that are making you disinclined to jump into your life. You should be enthusiastically grabbing your life every minute of every day. Uh, anyway, which I don't know. I don't know how that coincides with Stevestreams. Maybe it does. I'll say that it does. Uh, Anti-Guy says, brings to mind a question. What explains humanity's fascination with vampires or their creation by the mind of man in the first place? Well, folklore, probably, though the explanation is fear of death. Is the explanation for most of what animates human beings. Colombian Thunder says, one problem. How do I teach myself to be more aware of inherent issues? I admit myself that I've gotten myself lost in certain media purely on the mood, completely missing the glaring issues until others have pointed them out to me. Well, it sounds like the tunnel vision is the problem. So you have to inculcate daily habits that work against tunnel vision. In other words, you have to brace yourself, control yourself. You have to control yourself. Since you know that tunnel vision is a problem, you need to control the things you do that encourage that. And sooner or later, you will be in a different habit, and you won't do that. And the broader issues will be more readily evident to you. Let's. AKA says, I use a Kindle as well, Steve, but nevertheless, I do still enjoy physical books as well, despite their inferiority. So do I. So do I. But since the Kindle is an option, I'm only buying physical editions I really like. Right, right. The Kindle really, it should really focus what you buy. So you're not hoovering up anything that even remotely interests you in a print and paper format that is going to weigh a lot and take up a lot of space. This is, I've been saying since I fell in love with reading on from the e-reading, I've been saying, why on earth would I ever buy a CAD file novel by Ellis Peters? Why would I ever do that? I love them, and I love periodically revisiting, but they are pure ebooks. They're pure e-reader stuff. Same thing with the Inspector Brunetti books by Donna Leone. I love them, but why would I ever buy one? No, I would never do that. And that's a whole class of things. Never would I buy just an ordinary trade paperback of Agatha Christie or Hornblower, or just a million things that can go on here, so they're not on the shelf. Anyway, Colombian Thunder, the glaring issue until others have pointed them out to me. Oh, right. Don't Be Stupid is back. Email. I knew him at school and wanted to congratulate him on his success recently. Colin says, what's your favorite noir movie? I don't have a favorite noir movie. Anti-Guy says, Steve, what do you think of the YouTube phenomenon of people eating extremely hot chili peppers on camera? It's mostly men, of course. I've only watched a couple of the videos. I didn't know that it was a phenomenon. It's ridiculous, like most of YouTube. Cosmic A says, what is the worst northeastern U.S. state? I don't know. I guess Maine. I guess it would be Maine. Um, uh, don't Be Stupid. I don't find either religion or atheism to make sense. That means you're religious. AK says, what's your favorite book in Mishima's Sea of Fertility? I think it's Runaway Horses for me. Might be Runaway Horses for me as well. Adam Miller says, what are your thoughts on Alan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind? Mostly junk. Tara Billy says, Steve, do you agree that humans should get rid of birthdays? I can't stand people who are obsessed with their age. Tara Billy, what are you talking about? No, birthdays are other people's birthdays are tedious, but mine are wonderful. That's why I have 4 of them. I have 4 birthdays every year to maximize gift giving opportunities. Colin says, besides Darwin, are there any other scientists who are great writers in their own right? Charles Lyell, his book on principles of geology is really good reading. Do we count Stephen Jay Gould? Maybe we do. Do we count Carl Sagan? Maybe we do. One other scientist I could think of whose fiction was surprisingly good, but it was never even typed, much less published. So you're going to have to trust me on that. Uh, J. Scott Phillips, if they developed an e-reader with a chip that could be waved over a physical book and instantly uploaded for $1, $3, or $5, which would which would you buy in the Brattle sale lot? I don't know why that isn't possible. You're joking, but I don't know why that is possible. The technology exists so that I could do that, so that I could have a tablet, a Omnicom, and use it to instantly scan and digitize any printed book. I guarantee you that's possible now. Uh, but I would love to be able to do that. Of course, I would love to be able to do that. I mean, I get books at the Brattle, and I love finding things in them. I love tucking things into them, reviews and bookmarks and whatnot. And I have books on every wall and every inch of this place. But if I could do that, I wouldn't leave this device. This device is so easy. It's so convenient. Uh, Graveyard Shift says half the Vampire Chronicles cast was race swapped in the AMC remake. I know. Yeah, I saw. And it had nothing to do with lore or plot. No, it was just that Hollywood is contractually obliged to do that. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's become such a pattern now that they don't even think about it at all. They just don't even think about it. It's just routinely done. We're going to adapt X, Y, or Z, whatever it is. The only story conference that we are going to have. We're not going to talk about dramatic beats or how to fix this or how to goose the drama. We're not going to talk about the source material at all. All we're going to do for our story meetings is talk about which of those switches we're going to make. That's all. That's the only thing we're going to talk about. Uh, Tolstoy 111 says there was a recent update of the Wonder Years with the Black family. Why even call it that? Well, you call it that because you know that the other thing built an audience. Whatever the other thing is, the other thing built an audience. The other thing earned affection, and you want to parasitize that affection without earning it yourself. That's why they call it that. But there's no patent on up and coming stories set in the 60s. Why bring cultural baggage to it? Because we're all racist and we need to be improved. Uh, Michael Lombardo says, in your years at B&N, did you ever deal with a manager slash supervisor who was cool to you because they felt threatened by your knowledge or your likability among coworkers? Cool in the sense of cold or cool in the sense of great? There were plenty that felt threatened. Yeah, plenty of them that felt threatened. That was routine. Because I didn't genuflect, because I wasn't cringing or terrorized. A lot of them wanted that. You get that in retail management. A lot of people go into it for the tiny little power rush of being an assistant shift manager. uh, and also, uh, for a lot of those years, especially at the old store, I was known to upper management. I was not fireable. I would have had to do something really wrong. Not genuflecting to some just add water Mick manager who's going to be gone in 3 months was not really wrong. So, and they knew that. They knew that I wasn't a typical terrorized college student, um, and that if they were a jerk, well, I had the perfect uh, retaliation, which was to mock them in front of customers. On the fly in front of an audience, no one's better at that than I am. No one thinks on their feet in front of an audience the way I do. Hence these Stevestreams, and these managers all knew that. Most of them gave me a wide berth. Most of them tried not to make trouble. If I made my shifts, and if I wasn't openly insubordinate, and if there weren't any other problems like showing up drunk to work or whatever, then they were usually okay with this weird guy that would take over the information desk from noon to 2. Uh, but what an odd question. Well, how could that possibly be of interest? Let's see here. Street Medic says, I have serious doubts about multiple personalities being a real thing. Yeah, me too. I've seen it. I've seen that it is in some cases real. Certainly wasn't real in Gacy's case. Certainly not. Uh, uh, Rodensey says, Steve, thoughts on Nicholas God Cage as Spider-Man Noir? No thoughts at all. Rodensey says, I think Lawrence of Arabia may be the best film of all time. Good Lord. I wonder if you adore it as much as me. It achieves everything. The length is perfect. I saw it again in 70 millimeter in London. Omar Sharif. The simple truth is you might be right. I mean, you can guess already some of the things I'm thinking of, right? I'm thinking of the Philadelphia story. I'm thinking of 12 Angry Men. There are other things that I think about. And I also think about all the film bros that I have known in my life who would immediately say it was Spielberg's Jaws. But you might be right. There's something in that movie. There's something going on there. You might be right. You see in these Stevestreams, I'm perfectly willing to go at any opinion that is being thrown at me, even if I'm not really feeling like going at it. But in this case, I'm oh, so poop. In this case, I'm things are coming to mind. The Philadelphia story, 12 Angry Men, Ben-Hur. Oh, hi, baby. Hi, Squeak. That's going to have me thinking all night long. You might be right. Don't Be Stupid says it was like 9 years ago. I didn't see him play. Oh, you're not talking to me. Ryan says, hi, Steve. Wonderful to see you again. Thoughts on the new Brandon Sanderson? I didn't like it. I thought it felt slapped together. Don't Be Stupid says, according to the book of the book. Okay, I don't know who is this a whole conversation that you're having with other people? It seems like it is. Anti-Guy says, Steve, have you seen all these video clips of MAGA people copying Musk? My heart goes out to you salute. Yeah, insanity. Yeah. They're doing a Nazi salute and saying that we have always been doing Nazi salutes to say my heart goes out to you, and it's just crazy liberals who are making a big fuss out of it. What kind of level gaslighting is that? That these people are trying to make people believe they don't believe it. They absolutely don't believe it. They're trying to make people believe that we have always been sig hailing. And it's only now become some sort of problem. It's just the sheer arrogance of that level of gaslighting is just amazing to me. Rodency says, Steve, I have a copy of The Art of Shakespeare's Sonnets by Helen Vendler. Is it worth reading right now? Well, I don't know what you're doing right now. Does yours have the disc in the back? It is very much worth reading. Yeah. Rodency says, also, did you ever catch a 1982 film called The Draughtsman's Contract? Utterly amazing. No, I did not. AK says, Steve, what's your favorite conspiracy theory to read about? Are there any major ones that you believe in besides the aforementioned Shakespeare one? Well, it's hard to say what you believe in because there's never any conspiracy theory. It's just one theory. They always have a million variations. Probably though, there's nothing that I like reading more than Shakespeare. Mainly because there's no tragedy involved in the Shakespeare authorship controversy. There's no one dead. I mean, everyone's dead, but there's no tragedy involved. Like everybody on both sides of the question always says, the important thing is the brilliance of the work. Everyone agrees on that. No matter what else they think, they agree on that. And that is absolutely true. It's the importance of the work that matters, and the work is toweringly great. And so come up here. And so the authorship question itself becomes the most fun intellectual and historical exercise of them all. That's probably my favorite. Street Medic says S.R. Iyengar grew up in the Himalayas with no formal education and learned math from a basic textbook and became one of the greatest geniuses of all time. So I don't see why Shakespeare couldn't. Yes, you do. You're just being a snot. That's all. You don't see any difference between math and literature? I think you do. Steve Bronstein says misophonia is real, Steve. Okay, sure it is. Constance says Mark Rylance agrees with you about the man from Stratford. Oh, that's right, he does, doesn't he? And there's one other major actor who also agrees. Major living actor who also agrees. I forgot about that. Yeah, Mark Rylance does agree. Colombian Thunder says, I once heard a theory that if you gave a monkey a typewriter for an infinite amount of time, it could write the complete works of Shakespeare. I nominate his plays were written by a monkey, actually. Zachary says, hi, Steve. Love your video on Pound, the whole discussion of separating art from the artist. Thank you. Luke says, Elon obviously made the salute. How can any grown man make that gesture and not immediately realize what they've done and do it twice? He didn't just realize it afterwards. He knew what he was doing. Don't Be Stupid says, besides, why does everyone go crazy when it comes to Hitler? All right, we'll pass over that. That is the very last question like that you get, just so you know. Moonpone is here, shaming. Then there are cartoons all over this, shaming something for not knowing Steve's lore is unkind. I don't know what that comment means. Roy Rhodes says, Steve, do you think it was Bacon then? No, I don't have a candidate. It's a capital mistake to have a candidate. I don't have a candidate. I just say there's a fatal divide between the works and the person we're told to believe wrote the works. Don't Be Stupid is back. Why not the same reaction to Stalin or Leopold? Why always Hitler? Luca says, because one party has a leader that quotes from Hitler and a buddy that makes Nazi salutes and calls Nazis very fine people, among other things. Yeah, that's a good enough start for an answer. It's more generous than I'm going to be. Tolstoy 111 says, do you like Harold Schoenberg's The Lives of Great Composers? It's a delight. I think so too. Cosmic A says, Steve, I know you have read the Penguin Classic edition of King James Bible. I was going to purchase it, but there were negative reviews saying that it was edited from the original. Is this true? It's what does that mean? Edited from the original? It's just fine, and it also notes all the textual variations that it is using and not using. It's a magnificent volume, one of the most impressive volumes that Penguin Classics ever did. AKA says, Steve, what did you study at university? I have vague memories of you saying you didn't study literature. No, I did, but you should. No one should. I did. Don't Be Stupid is responding to Luca. Don't Be Stupid is saying, you're still responding to Luca, I hope. Luca says, Steve, when you say directors don't matter, is it that you deny a director's visual influence, or that it has negligible influence on the film's overall quality? That script/actors are more important. The latter. Sarah Bell says, hi, Steve, 34C here in Newcastle, Australia, listening while Indian cooking. I wish I could snap my fingers and go to snarf up your food. Oh, I haven't had Indian cooking in so long. There's a place right up the street that does it, but it's the type of thing you get from, a strip mall Indian food thing. Once you've had the real thing, you don't want to eat that. I wish it were 34C here. That's for sure. Street Medic says, I don't dismiss the possibility of Shakespeare being a latter-day Homer and not the author of his plays, but some people are just born smart, and he lived in a cosmopolitan city and could absorb a lot. No, you can't absorb the intimate line by line, almost paraphrastic quotations of a work that has not been translated into the only language it can be proven that you know. No, absorption, the Magic Tavern does not work. It's the favorite go-to of Stratfordians, but it does not work. Not once you look at the plays and see the plays themselves are the ultimate refutation of this. Once you look at the plays, you see if you take a step back, you realize a tradesman could not have done this. An actor or an acting manager talking with people in a tavern could not have done this. J. Scott Phillips, I have a problem. I always feel bad for a newbie innocently asked a have you read question, yet I wiggle with glee at the dressing down of the cat. How do I resolve this conflict? Well, have you read The Pillars of the Earth? What? Have you read Life After Life by Kate Atkinson when I'm on the paperback? I'm named on the paperback. Street Medic says, so neither can I dismiss him being the author. Well, I can. AKA says, Steve, any advice for traveling? I traveled alone through a number of cities in the U.S. last summer and loved it, but you're the expert on this. I seek the Dubro King's advice. Well, my advice might not apply to the 21st century. Keep in mind. in the 21st century, you don't need to carry cash. In most of the places that you go, you don't need to carry cash. You still have access to all of your funds. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff involved. A lot of my advice wouldn't apply if you have a cell phone. I traveled when there weren't any such things. So, uh, but the standard advice: don't dress like an American, don't act like an American. Uh, Pay attention to where you are. Intense situational awareness. Keep your cash money in 3 different places on your body, not 1 and not 2. Ask questions. Be flexible, but I don't know where you're traveling. Um, Freeman says Pillars of the Earth has to be in the top 1% of the Have You Read questions. It's up there. It's certainly up there. Uh, Although there's an extra pointedness to Life After Life, because anyway, uh, Street Medic says when it comes to Shakespeare, all you can say is that he may be the author or he may not be the author. We just don't know. No, no, that's not true. I know you're trying to pick a fight on the subject, but that's not true. No, that's not true. That is not all you can say. A dairymaid working 12 hours a day and living with her mother in Stratford-on-Avon, you might as well say, well, she might be the author, she might not be. No, you can say she might be the author or she might not be. And then you can say, but it's overwhelmingly unlikely that she was the author. It's 100% unlikely that she was the author. Same thing with Shakespeare the Grain Merchant. Not 100%, but it's not just he either wrote it or he didn't. It's that he's an unbelievably unlikely character, an unbelievably unlikely candidate to do the writing, an unbelievably unlikely candidate. You can say that too, and you'd be right about that as well. Anyway, Danger Kid says, after stewing on your obvious correctness, I'm off to squirt some diuretic nonsense onto a page. I will have to catch the remainder of the stream on replay. Yeah, you don't have writer's block. You don't, because there's no such thing. Writer's block operates under the assumption that so much of other thinking about writing does, which is that the writing is coming from somewhere else. This whole idea of the muse or inspiration, writer's block is the flip side of that, but it's the same religious belief. It's that your writing is coming from somewhere else. It's not. It's not. It's coming from your knowledge of your language and the muscles you use to move your fingers or your pen. That's where it's coming from. And that is going to be a process that's sometimes going to be smooth and sometimes not. But writer's block. What does block mean? What does it sound like? It sounds like you're dealing with a blockage of a pipe, and that otherwise something flows through the pipe, and that's not true. You are the pipe. Anyway, Cosmic Gaze says, is Thomas Pynchon? We have to wrap this up anyway. You have to go and write, but everybody else has to go do things too. Is Thomas Pynchon a brilliant writer, or is he just another James Joyce? No, he's brilliant. Clarence Bleeks says, good news. I figured out who you sound like. Claude from the movie Apology. Okay, do I really? Dylan says, that's a good point about just giving them a poetry anthology. Most people don't have my fondness for starting at the ground floor of any new interest. You may just have saved a future poetry lover. Yeah, it's an important thing for people like you. I'm actually a lot like you myself. It's an important thing for people like that to realize that most people aren't like that. Most people don't want to start at the beginning and read everything and work your way up and build a solid edifice. They're just day trippers. And there's nothing wrong with that. Aslan says, I read House of Open Wounds by Adrian Tchaikovsky last year and really, really loved it. Thought it was the best SFF that I read in a long time. Okay. What did you make of House of Open Wounds? I thought it was strictly average and a disappointment for this author who usually doesn't write average stuff. So I'm glad that you liked it, but I think a little wider reading would probably show you some of its blemishes. Don't Be Stupid, I think, is asking me a direct question. What are your thoughts on Master and Margarita? And this question is for the viewers as well. You simply will not ask me a question in my own chat. I myself am not impressed with the book. Dylan says, is responding to Don't Be... Okay. J. Scott Phillips, since you don't have a candidate for who actually wrote Shakespeare's works, do you at least think they were all written by the same hand? Are there stylistic tells? All through them. Yeah. They're all through. So all we have to do to push the man from Stratford into the spotlight is compare those plays with letters that he wrote, journal entries that he kept, prose works that he wrote, maybe letters to the Earl of Southampton. If you're going to have the gall to dedicate poems to him, you probably want to write a letter to him. Oh, but there isn't any. There isn't any of that. That doesn't exist. So we can't compare it to that. AKA says, does Legolas's ridiculous abilities in the films bother you at all? I find it quite fun, but I've heard some say it takes them out of the story. A couple of the moments do take you out of the story. Peter Jackson realized very early on the potential draw of a young Orlando Bloom as Legolas. He realized very early on that there isn't anything really cool in the books other than what he could do with Legolas. So in the Fellowship, no, unless you go to the director's cut. The director's cut has him when the scene of Boromir's death, he has him shooting 5 arrows in a row instead of 3. The theatrical version is 3 hours in a row. That's not quite so bad. It has him walking on the snow, but that's in Tolkien. That's in the Fellowship of the Ring. But then the second movie is the skateboarding. He skateboards downstairs on a shield, and also flipping backwards to get onto a horse during the warg attack. And though I guess maybe him walking up the chain in Moria, of the Trolls chain in Moria, that might. No, the answer to your question is no. The silly stunts that they have him do didn't really bother me. The only one that really bothered me is when he disables an armed crew on an Oliphant all by himself. Hey, baby, are you getting antsy? Girl, where's my girl? Come on down here, baby girl. That bothered me because that was just Kryptonian. That was just ridiculous. But the rest of them don't bother me. No. Certainly not anywhere near as bad as the physics-defying Tetris stuff that he does in the Hobbit movies. That bit in the Hobbit movies of him running up a disintegrating stones of a bridge is laughable. Just laughable. Don't be stupid. My favorite is Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and his We Who Wrestle with God. Anthony Tang says, what's your first novel's name? Well, none of my novels are published. You know that, right? First one is Optimus. Not Optimist, Optimus. A novel about the Roman Emperor Trajan. Wine and Calzone says, seriously, you're self-described 28-year-old hottie. By now, you should be used to some stiffening to occur when you appear in a chat. Not the good kind of stiffening. Johnny Go Lightly says, is William Gass a good author or just pretentious and boring? The Tunnel seems boring. He's a lot of both. Unlike a lot of Dude Bro favorites, there's worth in him. Don't Be Stupid is responding to Dylan. I can't help but read the response. Jordan Peterson is the greatest philosopher of the 21st century, best psychologist as well. Oh my. Okay. Don't be stupid. You have wandered into the wrong chat. No doubt about it now. If the Hitler crap didn't do it, that certainly does. You have wandered into the wrong chat. I don't like to say that. I usually like to say everybody's welcome, but you're definitely in the wrong place. Anyway, let's move on. AK says 2 Have You Reads in one stream. Let's make it 3. Have you read the Iliad? Dylan says, I think many people assume the upkeep of friendship implies it's somehow less than real. When you genuinely care for someone, you feel the desire to do the work of maintaining a relationship. Right. I'm not saying that it would be work. You should want to do it, but it won't. It still has to be done. Anthony Tang says, what's your first novel's name? Didn't you just ask that? Optimus. Colombian Thunder says, I love Perfect Days by Wim Wenders. I don't care if it's boring. I love it. You should care. If a work of art is boring, it's bad. Street Medic says, I haven't seen any candidates for the authorship of back to Shakespeare. Of the authors of Shakespeare's plays that don't have major objections to them, but why worry about it? A guy named Homer probably didn't write the Iliad, so what? We don't know anything at all about the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. So it is genuinely a so what. We know a lot about Shakespeare and his plays. We know a lot about the man, and we know a lot about the plays. I agree with you that the candidates all fall. But that doesn't change the gap. But anyway, we do have to wrap this up. I'm never going to get to the end of all these comments. That's just never going to happen. So I'm going to have to cut this off, and that's terrible. That feels terrible. But let's get back to, we were up to Street Medic. See how many more we can get done. Colin says, I think Paradise Lost was one of the toughest poems I've ever read. It was tough at parts and a bit fussy, but when Milton gets going, his prose is lightning. I agree on both counts. Uh, uh, Colombian Thunder says, my girlfriend and I once tried reading Vonnegut's short story collection together. Then we reached a story about corrective rape, and we both promptly got rid of our copies. Right. Uh, the, I'm not just saying that Vonnegut is a bad idea to give to teenage boys because he closes future doors to other possibilities. I'm talking about what's in the writing. The writing is poisonous. In addition to being crappy, it's also poisonous. J. Scott Phillips says, I've never really gotten poetry either. I love Kipling's verse. Why might that be? Well, according to current 21st century social media, that means you're a racist and a colonist, a colonizer. AKA says, adding to the friendship question and specific advice on making friendships in a big city. In my case, London, where despite the huge number of people, we're all moving so fast. Yeah, I noticed that about London. The few times that I've been there, it doesn't seem a very welcoming place, which is kind of odd. It's oddly enough, large cities usually are, in my experience. Not Paris, but also not entirely London. Constance says, "Oh my God, I have quoted your quote in the paperback of Life After Life to people. I am having a strange and wonderful, mind-blowing moment." Well, that's nice. Happy to provide. America Industry says, sad to see an educated historian like Victor Davis Hanson be a Trump apologist. Yeah. Very sad. Sad to see him also vindicated. It's because that means he's never going back. He'll never do serious work again. AK says, just looked up Alex O'Connor and his pinned video is titled Women, Slaves, and the Unforgivable Sin. Yeah, I don't know the guy, but I'm glad I don't. Well, that title is not indicative of the content of the video. You might be reading, I think you are reading the content of the video wrong. But you might find him interesting. Anti-Gaia says, what does Musk want to do with all this data he's trying to get access to? Well, like I mentioned in an earlier Stevestream, he wants to rule the world. Start with ruling America. But he isn't trying to get access to it. He has access to it. It's already been copied. The next step is to manipulate it. But he isn't trying to do that. That has already happened. Street Medic says, Musk wants to be the overlord. Don't Be Stupid says, I like Musk. He's doing the right thing. All right. You're either a bot or you're a moron. And if you're not a moron, you're a Nazi. Elon Musk is a Nazi. So if you like Musk and you think he's doing the right thing, you are definitely in the wrong chat. So kindly keep your mouth shut. AK says, Steve, do you have a favorite whale? What's your best whale encounter? Well, my favorite whale, like everybody else, would be a humpback whale. And I've encountered them many, many times. My favorite would probably be when I was sailing alone. Well, it was my Beagles, but on the Throckmorton, all by myself in the middle of nowhere, probably 4 days sailing in any direction to get to land. When a whale surfaced right next to my craft, obviously just curious. What's the matter, baby? No. Just surfaced next to my craft and exhaled, relaxed a little, looked at me. Very weird. Looked at by an eye the size of a baseball. Looked at me, and eventually, curiosity satisfied, just left. I often think about that. I often wonder where that whale is now. Uh, I don't know. You guess. It says, is there a period of history that diminishes itself for you as you read more about it? No. AK says, does Steve have an aging painting of himself in the attic that retains his godly good looks? Sean says, I have been doom scrolling for 4 hours straight since the end of work. You have to stop yourself. The only doom scrolling you should allow yourself is these Steve streams. But we have to end this. This is going on 2.5 hours. Rodensy says, thank you for the encouraging regarding time. I needed that, dear Steve. Street Medic says, how is a private citizen gaining access to the personal data of every single American possibly be doing the right thing? It's not. Rodensy says, I do not have flab. I am lean meat, but I will stop sleeping now. from 8 hours to 8 minutes. No, don't do that. It's really harmful for you to do that. Uh, 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 the Arab Cowboy says a good metric of that prediction is Alex O'Connor interviewing Ayaan Hirsi Ali recently, who is an ex-Muslim turned atheist turned Christian, just in time for her absorption into the right pendulum. Right. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is an obvious grifter, an obvious liar. And Alex J. O'Connor interviewing her was certainly. I am right. You will see. I have predicted every arc of this kid's route, and I know what will happen. It, it's it'll happen in stages, but it will make the news when it does. When he says, "I think I would that I'm probably a Catholic. I'm probably a Roman Catholic." Uh, J. Scott Phillips says, right now we have that river of blobs along the border of the United States and Canada, which we will have longer. The river of blobs of the border between the United States and Canada. Let's see here. Regency Royalist, you're uh, responding to someone else. Street Medic says, becoming an expert is becoming more and more attractive. An expat is becoming more and more attractive. Well, you had my advice a while ago to emigrate. Regency Royal says, Steve, top 10 most handsome man right now. Exclude yourself, narcissist. I don't have any idea. I'm supposed to make a list like that. Dylan says, Steve's right. I spent a week in the hospital last January after getting out. Steve's advice about embracing life, stop wasting time, had a great tool for helping along my recovery. Luca says, I like physical books largely for the separate pleasure of used book shopping, but also for the easy physical skipping through pages, though used books in Australia are much more expensive. Yeah, I hear a lot about how expensive things are uh, in Australia. That is pretty bad. About books, I mean. Don't be stupid. I'm not going to read your comment. I told you to get lost. That wasn't a request. Shut your mouth and get lost, you're Nazi scum. Uh, Colombian Thunder is responding to Regency Royalist. Let's see here. Regency Royalist is responding to Colombian Thunder. Street Medic. There you go. Stupid YouTube challenges. I once had to intubate an idiot who induced respiratory arrest in himself by doing the cinnamon challenge. Well, they all see how it works. They see how it works. They see that they can make you go viral. Dylan says, Maine, I never took you for a partisan of Pennsylvania, Steve. I was naming Maine because of all the drug stuff. That I just assume that makes it bad. uh, Arab Cowboy says, I stopped buying Kindle ebooks, but do we think our overlord Jeff Bezos will capitulate to the new administration and start pulling certain books from Kindle? Many in my e-library come to mind. He certainly will. Yeah. Uh, he will certainly remotely edit your book, Street Medic says. Michael Duffy says, Lauren Isley, I found to be a lovely science. Oh, that's right. Lauren Isley. Sure. Kay says, hi, Steve, going to be rereading the first 3 Lecter Thomas Harris books. Wanted to ask how you felt about the first 2 books before Hannibal was published, given your feelings on its ending. I love them. I'd be happy to do the read along with you. Sam says, Steve, what are your thoughts on antinatalism? I'm pretty sure you can guess. At the 2.5-hour mark, I'm pretty sure you can guess. Dylan says, the Wonder Years remake was fun. I never saw the original, but my mother loved it as a girl, and she thought the new one did right by the original. I love Dule Hill. I love Dule Hill, too. The Arab Cowboy says, Project Gutenberg books on Kindle should be safe, right, since they are locally sourced. Well, your Kindle isn't safe, and nor is the Kindle app on an iPad. When it comes to that, we're not there yet, because that's a huge market. Jeff Bezos is not going to want to torpedo that. But when he does bend the knee, the first time there's a widely publicized example of him currying favor with a tyrant by censoring a book, the Kindle's existence as the default e-reader is going to take a serious body blow. Street Medic says Lauren Isley is good, but Isaac Asimov is the king of science writing. Regent Rodency Royalist says Steve agreed with me. Good Lord, holy hell is real. Tolstoy 111 says the whole multiple personalities business came into the public eye with Sybil case, which later revealed to be a fraud. Exactly. Yeah, it was monkey see, monkey do. AKA says, I love the Philadelphia story, but if we're talking about screwball comedies, my favorite is Bring Up Baby and His Girl Friday. Bring Up Baby, I don't see. I've never understood people liking it. It's so thin. It's so dumb. His Girl Friday, though, could easily be. in the list that I'm talking about, except it's not going to be Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, I know it's apples and oranges, but uh, Lucas says the awful truth is good too. Rodensy Royalist is typing in all caps. Made my damn night. I could see you attempting to counter my claim, but you could only iconoclast so far. I did it. Okay. Uh, so you're not gonna do what I said. You're uh here we go. Uh, you're not going to leave on your own, so you have to be kicked out like a child. Colin says, "How do you think history will assess the Biden presidency? History written outside the United States will probably consider it largely a success, but will be bewildered why it handed over things to an autocracy, to a dictatorship. Why it willingly did that. Uh, there won't be any histories of the Biden presidency written inside the United States." Manny says, while waiting for Kotkin's third volume, I've been reading Robert Service's Stalin biography, and I think it is brilliant. Do you like it? Yeah, it is very good. John Stanley says, what do you think of the Star Trek short, a whole string of numbers, unification? I don't know what that is. I probably do know what that is. I've probably seen it, but I don't know that name. Wine and Calzone says, best years of our lives. That's the scene with Dana Andrews in the field of dismantled bombers. Rhodesy Royalist says, Steve, Derek Jacobi also thinks it was. Oh, right. Derek Jacobi and Mark Rylance. That's right. Scott Jones says, here's another piece of Bigfoot conspiracy for you. He's Canadian, lives in Saskatchewan. AKA says, do you remember if there's one specific Star Trek episode that made you fall in love with the show? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the show almost from the beginning. But it was the second season that did it. It was the shift from the end of the first season and then the second season. So City on the Edge of Forever, Amok Time, Who Mourns for Adonis, Balance of Terror was probably the first one that I really fell in love with. But Balance of Terror was probably the first time, but the hits just kept on coming. Catherine Lockhart says, hello, Steve and the Beans. So happy to catch you live. Yeah, but we're wrapping things up. Not because of you, but we're wrapping things up. And I also had my very first dedicated troll for this year, which is a little soiling. Uh, uh, Michael Duffy says, where would you point to for a good book on literary criticism? Listening to you break down a book when it's great or when it fails is a skill I'm trying to cultivate. I would read collected book reviews. Any collected book reviews that you can get your hands on. Watch people do it, and you'll get better at it, I think. Street Medic says Hitchcock was a director that mattered, in my opinion. Lucas says, Steve, I'm doing English at university. Does that count as a problem? Yes, it does. Dylan says, I can't recall who said it, but they summed up the issue at hand well. Illiterate, illiterate, illiterate. Words, greatest writer, illiterate, illiterate, illiterate. Quite an odd family tree to have. 1 point on a data set among many. One among many, but yes, all the ancestors illiterate, all the descendants illiterate. The guy in the middle wrote King Lear because he listened at a tavern. Rodensy says, thoughts on MC Escher's art? I love it, dude. Tolstoy 111 says, regarding 12 Angry Men, the original 1954 production is the only version worth watching. Surely all cultured people agree on this. Well, I don't know if I count as cultured, but I saw the Jack Lemmon, George C. Scott version with, you name it. Look at all the people who were in there. Edward James Olmos was in there. James Gandolfini, Tony Danza, only effective. It wasn't as good as the original, but it wasn't bad. Dylan says, I'm not sure it questions the intelligence of working people so much as it questions certain learned traits, most obviously literacy, which until very recently was a rare skill to have. Street Medic says, not trying to pick a fight, just trying to explain why I have reservations about anti-Stratfordian arguments. I also have reservations about Stratfordian arguments. It's okay to be agnostic. Rodensy says, do you think Viggo Mortensen is one of the best actors ever? I certainly do. No. No, he's not. Oh my God. Dylan says, agreed, Street Medic. It's a fun debate. It's clear as far as debates go, not worth throwing chairs over. I agree. That's one of the things I like about Shakespeare, as opposed to any other conspiracy, is that there's no live chambers. It's purely fun. Should be purely fun. Uh, uh, where did we go? Street Medic, I think, was next. Yes, there we go. A good soldier can shoot 3 rounds in a minute in any weather. That's my style, sir. AK says Legolas triple arrow on the Oliphant is hilarious. Yeah, but it's a little much. J. Scott Phillips says, "How dare you ask Steve if he's read the Iliad? He's blurbed on the cover." Jay Wisinick says, "Why is Faulkner so bad? You name it. Crappy prose, crappy author, crappy stance, no plots, crappy characters." Manny says, "Have you read Herodotus then?" I checked through my black spine penguins on my Penguin Deluxe, and you are nowhere to be seen. So I'm guessing not. So you really should. I don't know why I wasn't blurbed on the Penguin Classic Deluxe. Tom Holland, Herodotus. I wrote a really good review that I think is blurbed on the Amazon page for the book. But I just didn't make it onto the book. What a thrill that would have been. That would have been a thrill of a lifetime to be blurbed on Herodotus. I wrote a really good piece about that for the quarterly conversation. Aaron says, "In my experience, Chicago is the friendliest big city." Tolstoy 111 agrees. Colombian Thunder says, "I highly suspect Don't Be Stupid is either 15 years old or 30 and lost, either one of those." Street Medic says, "Don't forget Hesiod." Columbia says, "That explains a lot." Colombian Thunder says, "I am 2 years old." Yes News says, "How has your fiction writing been coming along, and how soon can we expect the writing community?" Fiction writing hasn't been happening at all, but the writing community should. That would probably help the other. Martin says, "Steve, I just read A Distant Mirror after watching your book club vids. It was so good. Going to Mary Beard's SPQR next." Well, we have a book club coming up in March. We'll be reading about Queen Elizabeth II. Not everybody's cup of tea, but a very good book. Street Medic says, "Somehow a dog named after Ayn Rand seemed terrible philosophy and atrocious writing. Can't get much worse." Fahim says, "I started reading Marshland by Otohiko Kaga recently. So far, it's all right. Do you have any thoughts on it?" I don't know that I read Marshland. Joshua Kribo is here, but we have to leave. Joshua, you're getting here at just the wrong time. We have to leave. You and I have to make a video, but I'm wrapping up the Stevestream. Hey, Steve, seems I'm late to the stream. Yes, you are. You missed not one, but two have you read questions and a troll, a genuine Nazi troll, not a bot. Uh, uh, I just watched Bicycle Thieves by Vittorio De Sica. Do you like that film? No. Anti-Guy says, "Here's an easy one, perhaps, Steve. Did Joe McCarthy have any redeeming qualities as a man?" No. AK says, "The Apartment or Some Like It Hot. Not sure I can choose." Wine and Calzone says, "After the first troll of the year, does that mean 6 more weeks of winter?" I don't know. Is that how it works? I don't know. Uh, Brian Constantine says, "My JFK pet conspiracy is that two unrelated shooters happened to pick the same place to shoot, or maybe the second shooter wanted to kill the governor." The ultimate Dealey Plaza conspiracy theory, the ultimate would be exactly that two people took a shot at the president. Uh, I, I think that's unbelievably unlikely. But nevertheless, Mike C says, "Interested to hear your thoughts on the Isaacson biography of Elon Musk. It's terrible." Rodency says, when are you growing a mustache? I am not. Wine and Calzone says, "Good night." Rodency says, "A la Vincent Price, of course." Yes, but no, still no. Manny says, "Are you a fan of Dr. Glass?" No. Rodency says, "Any Phoebe's film?" I don't even know what you're talking about. Street Medic says, "Steve should grow a Nosferatu style mustache." The Fantasy Network is here, but we're leaving. You show up just as we're leaving. We're leaving at the 2.5 hour mark. Any Rex on a Tolstoy biography? Well, the standard one. There are two standards. A.N. Wilson, not an author I particularly like, but his Tolstoy book is effective, or Troyat's book. Both are good, and both should be readily available. They've been reprinted a million times, and if you can't find them, feel free to let me know, and I will find them for you. Your name was taken. Your name has come up on this Stevestream much earlier. Scott Jones says Penguin should let you write the introduction or at least blurb Orlando Furioso. You're one of its staunchest champions. Never been asked to do that. Never been asked to do anything like it. Not by the person who's commissioning it. I have often been asked by the person who got the commission when they couldn't do it, but I've never been asked by a publisher to do that. AKA says good night. Fruit Jelly says good night, Bean. Rodency says you better have a good night, Steve. You better. Fantasy Network says thank you. Constance Campbell says thanks for a great time, Steve. I promise never again, though I can't regret it. Chromerica Industry says thanks, Steve. See you tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe we'll see, but not for 2.5 hours. You absolutely cannot get used to 2.5 hours. You can't do that. But anyway, yeah, we're going to wrap this up. I got to the end of the comments, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you all for being here. This was wonderful. Barring a few burps, this was wonderful, and I had a great time. So we'll wrap this up, and we will reconvene next time, whether it's tomorrow or the night after that. I'll see you all then, I hope.